In court, my wife and her father claimed that I'm a dropout and couldn't handle money. Their lawyer grinned, as if everything had already been decided. They wanted my bank account, my car, even the apartment I had paid for myself. Then the bailiff opened his folder and began to read out the list. At the third item, the judge suddenly recoiled, his eyes wide open. "Stop immediately. Get security in here," he shouted, and my wife froze. The courtroom smelled like old wood and broken promises. I sat there, hands folded on the table in front of me, watching the fluorescent lights flicker against the mahogany paneling that was supposed to make this place feel dignified, sacred even. But there was nothing sacred about what was happening here. Nothing dignified about watching the woman I'd loved for 8 years sit across the aisle with her father, both of them wearing expressions I'd never seen before. Cold, calculated, almost hungry. My wife, Jessica. She wouldn't look at me. Not once since we'd entered this room had her eyes met mine. She kept them trained on her lawyer instead, a man named Whitmore, who wore a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent and a smile that suggested he'd already won. He probably had. That's what money bought you, wasn't it? Confidence. The kind that didn't need to be earned because it had been purchased, tailored, and fitted perfectly to hide all the ugly truths underneath. I'd worn my only suit, the same one I'd worn to our wedding. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Mr. Chen," the judge said, and I straightened in my chair. Judge Morrison was in his 60s with silver hair and reading glasses that sat perpetually at the end of his nose. He looked tired, or maybe just bored. How many cases like this had he presided over? How many marriages had he watched dissolve in this very room, reduced to arguments about bank accounts and property deeds and who deserved what? "Yes, Your Honor," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "We're here today regarding the dissolution of your marriage to Jessica Chen, née Hartwell, and the subsequent division of assets." He shuffled some papers. "I've reviewed the initial filings. Mrs. Chen is seeking primary custody of all jointly held assets, including the residence at 1247 Maple Street, the 2019 Tesla Model 3, and the joint checking and savings accounts. All jointly held assets." The words tasted like ash in my mouth, because here's the thing they weren't saying out loud. None of it was joint. Not really. The apartment. I'd paid the down payment with money I'd saved for 3 years before we even got married. The car, bought with a bonus from a project I'd completed ahead of schedule. The savings account, built from my salary, my overtime, my blood and sweat while Jessica pursued her passions, which mostly involved expensive yoga retreats and a pottery class she'd attended twice. But we'd gotten married, and in this state, that meant what was mine became ours, and now, apparently, what was ours would become hers. "Your Honor," Whitmore stood, buttoning his jacket with the practiced ease of someone who did this dozens of times a week. "If I may address the court." "Proceed, Mr. Whitmore." "Thank you." He smiled, not at the judge, but at me. It was the smile of a predator who'd already tasted blood. "Your Honor, my client has suffered tremendously in this marriage. Mr. Chen, despite my client's patience and support, has proven himself to be financially irresponsible and, frankly, incapable of managing even basic household finances." I felt my jaw tighten. "My client's father, Mr. Richard Hartwell." He gestured to the man sitting beside Jessica, a barrel-chested businessman with steel-gray hair and a face like carved stone, attempted on numerous occasions to offer guidance, to help Mr. Chen establish a stable foundation for his family. But Mr. Chen's pride got in the way. He refused assistance. He refused advice. And ultimately, he refused to grow up. "Grow up?" The words hung in the air like a slap. Richard Hartwell nodded slowly, his expression one of disappointed patience, the kind of look a parent gives a child who's let them down one too many times. Beside him, Jessica dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, though I noticed no tears actually fell. She'd always been good at that. The performance. Furthermore, Whitmore continued, walking toward the center of the room now, commanding the space, Mr. Chen has no college degree. He dropped out of university in his second year. I didn't drop out, I said. The words came out before I could stop them. My lawyer, a younger man named David Park, who I'd found through a legal aid service, touched my arm. A gentle warning. Don't engage. Let him do the talking. But Whitmore's smile only widened. No, he tilted his head. According to the records we've obtained, you left Stanford University in your sophomore year and never returned. In common parlance, Mr. Chen, that's called dropping out. I left, I said, keeping my voice level, because my mother had a stroke. Someone needed to take care of her. And that's very noble, Whitmore said in a tone that suggested it was anything but. But nobility doesn't pay bills. It doesn't create stability. And it certainly doesn't qualify someone to manage significant assets. Significant assets. He said it like I was sitting on a fortune. Like the apartment I'd scrimped and saved for was some kind of mansion. Like the used Tesla I'd bought certified pre-owned was a yacht. Your Honor, Whitmore turned back to the judge. My client is asking for what is rightfully hers. She invested 8 years of her life into this marriage. 8 years of emotional labor, of supporting a man who, despite her faith in him, has consistently failed to provide the stability and security she deserves. The residence, the vehicle, the accounts. These are the minimum compensation for the sacrifice she's made. Sacrifice. I almost laughed. The sacrifice of what? Of spending my money? Of living rent-free in an apartment I'd bought? Of driving a car I'd paid for while she complained it wasn't the newer model? But I didn't laugh. I didn't say any of that. Because this was how it worked, wasn't it? This was the game. They painted you as the villain, and you sat there and took it, because defending yourself only made you look defensive. Guilty. Like you had something to hide. Mr. Park, the judge said, does your client wish to respond to these allegations? David stood. He was younger than Whitmore by at least a decade, less polished, less confident. His suit was off the rack, his shoes scuffed, but his eyes were sharp. Your Honor, my client disputes the characterization of his financial responsibility. Mr. Chen has maintained steady employment for the past decade. He's never missed a rent payment, never defaulted on a loan. His credit score is irrelevant, Whitmore interrupted. What matters is his fitness to manage assets of this magnitude. And given his background, a college dropout working a mid-level job. Objection, David said. Counsel is testifying. Sustained, Judge Morrison said, though he sounded almost bored. Mr. Whitmore, stick to the facts. Of course, Your Honor. Whitmore nodded, not even remotely chastened. The facts are these. Mr. Chen lacks the education, the experience, and the judgment necessary to manage the assets in question. My client, on the other hand, comes from a family with extensive business experience. Her father has nothing to do with this case, David interjected. Her father, Whitmore continued, louder now, is prepared to assist in managing these assets to ensure they're not squandered through my client's ex-husband's poor decisions. And there it was, the real play. Richard Hartwell wanted the apartment, the car, the money. Not for Jessica, for himself, or maybe for both of them. A little reward for the dutiful daughter who'd married beneath her station and was now finally coming home. I looked at Jessica again. She was still crying, still dabbing at eyes that produced no tears. And I wondered, when had I stopped recognizing her? When had the woman I'd fallen in love with, the one who used to laugh at my terrible jokes and dance in the kitchen while we made dinner, become this stranger, this actress playing the role of the wronged wife? Or had she always been this person, and I'd just been too blind to see it? Your Honor, Judge Morrison's bailiff said suddenly, we have the financial disclosures. The judge nodded. Proceed. The bailiff, A heavy-set man in his 50s, with a kind face, approached the bench carrying a folder. A thick folder, I noticed. He handed it to the judge, then returned to his position. Judge Morrison opened it. For a moment, there was only the sound of pages turning, the soft rustle of paper, the hum of the ventilation system, the tick of the clock on the wall, counting down the seconds of my old life. Then the judge's expression changed. It was subtle at first, just a slight narrowing of his eyes, a tightening around his mouth, but as he continued reading, flipping through page after page, his face transformed. The boredom vanished, replaced by something else, surprise, confusion, and then alarm. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, almost to himself. Whitmore straightened. "Your Honor." Judge Morrison didn't answer. He kept reading, his eyes moving faster now, scanning the documents with increasing intensity. His hand went to his temple, rubbing it as if he'd suddenly developed a headache. Jessica glanced at her father. Richard Hartwell frowned. I sat perfectly still. "Bailiff," the judge said sharply, "did you verify these documents?" "Yes, Your Honor. They came directly from the financial institutions, all certified." "And you've reviewed them?" The bailiff hesitated. I glanced at them, Your Honor, standard disclosure forms." "These are not standard," Judge Morrison said. His voice had changed. Gone was the tired, bored tone. Now he sounded alert, focused, almost angry. "Mr. Whitmore, did you review your client's financial disclosure forms?" Whitmore's confidence flickered, just for a second. Yes, Your Honor. I reviewed Mrs. Chen's submissions personally." "And did Mrs. Chen disclose all relevant financial information?" "Of course. My client has been entirely forthcoming." "Did she disclose," the judge interrupted, his voice rising, "that she opened 3 credit cards in her husband's name without his knowledge?" The room went silent. I felt my heart stop. Credit cards? "Your Honor, I'm not sure what you're referring to," Whitmore said, and for the first time, he sounded uncertain, defensive. "Did she disclose," the judge continued, flipping through more pages, "that she accumulated $73,000 in debt using those credit cards?" 73,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. Jessica's face had gone pale. Richard Hartwell was leaning forward now, whispering urgently to Whitmore, who was shaking his head, his own face flushed. "Did she disclose," the judge said, his voice now cold and hard, "that she forged her husband's signature on a second mortgage application for their residence?" No, this couldn't be." "And did she disclose the wire transfers, multiple wire transfers totaling—" He paused, his eyes widening. "Totaling over $200,000 from joint accounts to an offshore account registered in her maiden name." The world tilted. I couldn't breathe. $200,000. "Your Honor," Whitmore started, but Judge Morrison held up a hand. "I'm not finished, Counselor." He looked down at the folder again, and I saw his hands were actually shaking. "There's more. Investment accounts liquidated. Retirement funds withdrawn early. Tax fraud. Yes, tax fraud. False claims. Fabricated deductions." He looked up, and his eyes found Jessica. "Mrs. Chen, do you understand that some of what's documented here constitutes criminal activity?" Jessica's mouth opened, closed. No sound came out. "Bailiff," Judge Morrison said, his voice sharp as a blade, "get security in here. Now." The bailiff moved immediately, speaking into his radio. "Your Honor," Whitmore said, his voice rising with desperation, "surely there's been some mistake." "Stop immediately," the judge ordered. "The only mistake here is that this wasn't discovered sooner." He stood, gathering the folder. "This hearing is adjourned. Mrs. Chen, you are ordered to remain in this courtroom until court security arrives. Mr. Hartwell," his eyes shifted to Richard, "I suggest you contact your attorney. Based on these documents, there are questions about your involvement in some of these transactions." Richard Hartwell's face had gone from stone to ash. "This is absurd. Jessica found her voice suddenly. He's lying. He made those up. He's trying to... Mrs. Chen, Judge Morrison said, and his voice cut through her words like a knife through silk. These documents came from financial institutions, not your husband. They're certified. They're verified. And they paint a very clear picture of systematic financial fraud and identity theft. Jessica looked at me then. Finally, after all this time, she looked at me, and in her eyes I saw it, the moment she realized her performance had failed. The moment the mask slipped and revealed the truth underneath. She was terrified. "Your Honor," David Park said, standing slowly, "my client was unaware of any of this activity. He's as shocked as the court." "I believe you, Mr. Park," the judge said. "In fact, based on these documents, your client appears to be the victim here, not the defendant." He looked at me, and something in his expression softened, just slightly. "Mr. Chen, I'm going to recommend you speak with the district attorney's office. What's been done to you? It's not just a civil matter anymore." The door opened. 2 security officers entered, and my wife who'd sat across from me with fake tears and real accusations, stood frozen as they approached. "Jessica Hartwell Chen," one of the officers said, "we need you to come with us." She didn't move, couldn't move. And I sat there, my hands still folded on the table, my heart hammering in my chest, my mind racing to catch up with what had just happened. Everything had changed. In the space of 5 minutes, my entire world had inverted. But I didn't understand how. I didn't understand why. I didn't understand anything except this. The folder the bailiff had brought into that courtroom contained something so damning, so explosive, that it had stopped a divorce proceeding in its tracks and turned my wife into a criminal suspect. And I had no idea what was inside it. They took her out in handcuffs. Not the metal ones you see in movies. These were plastic zip ties, white against her wrists, pulled just tight enough to leave marks. Jessica didn't fight, didn't scream. She just walked, 1 foot in front of the other, her head down, her father following behind her with his phone already pressed to his ear, barking orders at whoever was unfortunate enough to be on the other end. I watched them leave. The heavy courtroom doors closed with a sound like a judge's gavel, final, absolute, irreversible. And then there was silence. Judge Morrison had retreated to his chambers. Whitmore had gathered his things with shaking hands and disappeared without a word. The court reporter sat frozen at her machine, her fingers hovering over keys she'd stopped pressing minutes ago. Even the bailiff, the one who'd brought in that folder, that impossible, devastating folder, stood near the window, staring out at nothing. I couldn't move. My body felt like it belonged to someone else. My hands still folded on the table, my shoulders still straight, my face still composed. But inside, everything was screaming. $200,000, $73,000 in credit card debt, forged signatures, second mortgages, offshore accounts. How? How had I not known? "Daniel," David Park's voice cut through the fog. He was sitting beside me now, though I hadn't noticed him move. His hand was on my shoulder, gentle but firm. "Daniel," he said again, "we need to talk." I turned to look at him. His face was pale, his eyes wide behind his glasses. He looked almost as shocked as I felt. Almost. "Did you know?" I asked. My voice came out hollow. "Did you know about any of this?" He shook his head slowly. "No, I knew there were irregularities, things that didn't add up in their filings. But this," he gestured toward where the judge had been sitting, where that folder had been opened and read and transformed everything. "This is beyond anything I could have anticipated." "Then how?" I stopped, swallowed hard. "How did it get here? Those documents, those records. Someone had to compile them. Someone had to request them from the banks, verify them, submit them to the court." David was quiet for a moment. too quiet. "David," I said, and something in my voice must have changed because he met my eyes. "Who did this?" "I don't know," he said. "You're lying." He flinched, but he didn't look away. "I'm not lying," he said carefully. "I'm telling you the truth. I don't know who compiled these documents, but—" He paused, choosing his words. "Someone sent them to me 3 days ago. A courier delivered them to my office in a sealed envelope. No return address, no note, just the documents." My heart was pounding now. "What do you mean someone sent them to you?" "Exactly what I said." I opened the envelope, and inside was everything the judge just read. Bank statements, credit card records, loan applications, wire transfer confirmations, tax documents. All of it organized, indexed, cross-referenced, professional, meticulous. "That's impossible," I said. "You can't just request someone's financial records. There are privacy laws, legal protections." "I know," David said, "which is why I spent the last 3 days trying to verify them. I called the banks, the credit card companies, the mortgage lender. Every single document checked out. They're real, Daniel. They're all real. Real." The words settled over me like snow, cold, quiet, suffocating. "But who would do this?" I asked. "Who even could do this?" David shook his head. "Someone with resources. Someone who knew what to look for and how to find it. Someone who wanted you to have this information before you walked into that courtroom and lost everything. Someone. A ghost. A phantom. An invisible hand reaching through the machinery of the legal system to deliver justice I hadn't asked for and didn't understand." "There's something else," David said, and his voice had dropped lower now, almost conspiratorial. "The envelope, it had your name on it." "What?" "Not my name. Yours. Daniel Chen. Evidence for dissolution hearing. Like whoever sent it knew you'd retained me. Knew exactly when this hearing was scheduled. Knew everything." I felt cold. "David, that's not possible. I didn't tell anyone about this case. My mother doesn't even know we're getting divorced." "Then someone was watching," he said simply. "Someone was paying attention, and they decided to help." Help? Was that what this was? Help? It felt more like an earthquake. Like someone had reached down into the foundation of my life and exposed all the rot I'd been living on top of, not knowing, not seeing, blind to the decay until it was too late. Except it wasn't too late. That was the thing that kept echoing in my mind. It wasn't too late. If that folder hadn't appeared, if that mysterious someone hadn't compiled those documents and sent them to David, I would have walked out of this courtroom with nothing. Jessica would have taken the apartment, the car, the savings. She would have taken everything, and I would have spent the rest of my life paying off debts I didn't even know existed. "We need to file a police report," David said. "Identity theft, fraud, forgery, all of it." The judge was right. This isn't just civil anymore. This is criminal. Criminal? My wife was a criminal. The woman I'd married in a garden ceremony 8 years ago, who'd cried happy tears and promised to love me in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, till death do us part. She was a criminal. Or maybe she'd always been one, and I'd just been too in love to notice. "Daniel," David said gently, "I know this is a lot. I know you need time to process. But we need to act quickly. There's a window here. I need to see them." I interrupted. "What?" "The documents. I need to see everything in that folder." David hesitated. "The judge took them into chambers. He'll probably forward them to the DA's office." "I don't care about the judge's copy," I said. "You said someone sent them to you, which means you have copies." He studied my face for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Back at my office," he said. "I have everything scanned and printed. But Daniel, I'm warning you, it's not easy to read. Seeing everything laid out like that, all the lies, all the theft, it's going to hurt." "I know," I said. But I didn't know. Not really. Not yet. David's office was in a converted brownstone 20 minutes from the courthouse. 3 floors, narrow stairs, old radiators that clanked and hissed even though it was spring. His practice was small, just him and a paralegal named Maria, who worked part-time. But it was enough. He took cases like mine, people who couldn't afford the Whitmores of the world, people who needed someone to fight for them, even when they couldn't fight for themselves. The folder was waiting on his desk. It was thicker than I'd imagined. A 3-ring binder, actually, with plastic sleeves protecting each document. Someone had organized it with divider tabs, credit cards, loans, wire transfers, tax documents, legal forgeries. There was a tab for that. "Take your time," David said, pulling up a chair beside me. "I'll walk you through it if you want, or I can give you space. Whatever you need." "Stay," I said. "Please." He nodded. I opened the binder. The first section was credit cards. 3 of them, all opened within the past 4 years. Capital One, Chase, American Express, all in my name, all with my social security number, all with signatures that looked like mine but weren't, just close enough to pass a cursory inspection but wrong in small ways, the way the D curved, the angle of the L in Daniel, small things that I'd never notice unless I was looking for them. But someone had been looking. Someone had noticed. The statements were there too, month by month, a chronicle of spending I'd never authorized. Designer handbags, jewelry, spa treatments, wine, so much wine. Expensive restaurants I'd never been to, hotels in cities I'd never visited. "This one," David said, pointing to an American Express statement from 18 months ago. "Look at the charges." I looked. $4,200 at Tiffany & Co., $6,800 at Louis Vuitton, $3,500 at a spa resort in Napa Valley, all in the same week. "That was her birthday trip," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "She told me her father paid for it. A gift." "He might have paid for the flight," David said, "but she paid for everything else, with your credit." I turned the page. More charges. More stores. More restaurants. A pattern emerging. Every time Jessica told me she was spending time with friends, every time she went on a girls' weekend or a yoga retreat or a shopping trip, there were charges, thousands of dollars, tens of thousands, and I'd never known. "How?" I asked. "How did she get the cards? They would have been mailed to our address." "P.O. box," David said, flipping to a document near the back of the section. "She opened a box at a UPS store 3 blocks from your apartment. Used your name, your license, or a fake of it. The cards were sent there. She'd thought of everything, planned it, executed it, maintained it for years." I moved to the next section. Loans. The second mortgage was there, all the paperwork, neat and damning. $150,000 borrowed against our apartment, using forged documents, false income statements. Money that had gone directly into an account I'd never seen. "Where did it go?" I asked. "The loan money, the credit card cash advances. Where did it all go?" David flipped ahead to the wire transfers section, page after page of bank records. My hands trembled as I read them. Transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands, in Switzerland, in Singapore, all under Jessica's maiden name, Jessica Marie Hartwell. She was moving money out systematically, David explained. Small amounts at first, 500 here, 1,000 there. Nothing that would trigger automatic fraud alerts. But over time, he pointed to a summary sheet someone had created tallying everything. Over 4 years, she moved $287,000 offshore. I couldn't breathe. $287,000. That was more than I'd made in salary over that entire period. More than we'd had in our joint accounts. More than should have been possible unless... She refinanced, David said, reading my thoughts. Twice. Each time she did it, she siphoned off most of the cash. The first time, you probably didn't notice because she told you the bank required closing costs, processing fees. The second time, she did it without your knowledge entirely. I thought back. 2 years ago, Jessica had been excited about interest rates dropping. She'd shown me articles about refinancing, how much we could save. I'd been busy with a major project at work, drowning in deadlines, trusting her to handle it. I'd signed papers without reading them carefully. I'd trusted her. The tax fraud, I said, almost afraid to ask. What was that? David's face darkened. He turned to the last section. She claimed you as a dependent on her father's business taxes, he said. Listed you as an employee of Hartwell Enterprises. Claimed she was paying your salary. Deducted your business expenses. None of it was real. You never worked for them. But she filed the paperwork anyway, probably to create paper trails that made it look like you were financially dependent on them. Why would she do that? For today, David said simply. For the divorce. She was building a case, creating documentation that would make you look incompetent, dependent, incapable of managing your own finances. When Whitmore stood up in that courtroom and called you a dropout who couldn't handle money, he wasn't just making it up. He was following a script she'd been writing for years. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the desk, trying to anchor myself to something solid, something real. 8 years. We'd been married for 8 years. And for how many of those had she been planning this? 4? 5? Had there ever been a time when she'd actually loved me? Or had I been a mark from the beginning? A target? Someone with just enough money to be worth stealing from, but not enough to fight back? Daniel, David said softly. There's one more thing. I looked at him. He turned to the very back of the binder, to a section I hadn't noticed yet. No tab, just a single document in a clear sleeve. It was a letter, handwritten. This came with the other documents, David said. I didn't show it to the judge because it's not evidence, technically, but I think you need to read it. My hands were shaking as I pulled it out. The handwriting was elegant, practiced, fountain pen on cream-colored stationery. It began, Mr. Chen, by now you know the truth, but truth alone is not enough. I kept reading. Your wife has been stealing from you for 4 years. Her father has been complicit in the fraud, using his business connections to facilitate the offshore transfers and create false documentation. They planned to bankrupt you in the divorce, to take everything you'd worked for and leave you with nothing but debt and shame. But you deserve more than just to know. You deserve justice, real justice. The documents I've compiled are irrefutable. They will protect you in court. They will expose your wife and her father for what they are. But they are also incomplete. There is more, much more. If you want to know the full scope of what's been done to you, and if you want to ensure they pay for all of it, not just what the law can prove in a courtroom, you need to understand something. You were not their only victim. Meet me if you want answers. Meet me if you want to finish this. The Harbor Park Fountain, Saturday, noon. Come alone. Come ready to learn how deep the rot goes. A friend who understands betrayal. The letter ended there. No signature, no name. Just that final line, enigmatic and ominous. I read it again, then a third time. What does it mean? I asked. Not their only victim. David shook his head. I don't know, but whoever wrote this, they know things. Things that aren't in any public record. Things that would take serious resources and serious motivation to uncover. I looked at the date on my phone. Friday. Tomorrow was Saturday. Are you going to go? David asked. I thought about Jessica being processed somewhere in a holding cell. About Richard Hartwell probably calling in favors from every politician and judge he'd ever donated to. About Whitmore scrambling to distance himself from a case that had just exploded in his face. And I thought about that folder. That impossible, meticulous, devastating folder that had appeared from nowhere and saved me from losing everything. Someone had done this. Someone had been watching. Someone wanted me to know the truth. "Yes," I said. "I'm going." David nodded slowly. "Then I'm coming with you." The letter said, "Come alone." "I don't care what the letter said," David replied. "Whoever this person is, they've been investigating your life, your finances, your wife, for months, maybe longer. That kind of obsession, it's not normal, Daniel. It's not safe." "They helped me," I said. "They also manipulated you," David countered. "They sent this evidence at precisely the right moment, not before. They could have warned you years ago, stopped the fraud before it got this bad. But they didn't. They waited. They watched. And now, they want something. What could they possibly want from me?" David's eyes were grave. "That's what worries me." I looked down at the letter again, come ready to learn how deep the rot goes. And despite everything, despite the fear, despite the exhaustion, despite the part of me that wanted to just walk away from all of this and start over somewhere else, somewhere clean, I felt something else stirring. Curiosity, anger, and beneath it all, something darker, the need to know. Because David was right. Someone had been watching me, studying me, documenting every betrayal, every theft, every lie. And they'd waited until the perfect moment to intervene. Why? What game was I in that I didn't even know I was playing? "Saturday," I said quietly. "Harbor Park, noon." "We'll be ready," David said. I closed the binder. But I knew that whatever was inside it, devastating as it was only the beginning. Someone out there knew the truth about my life better than I did. And tomorrow, I was going to meet them. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw numbers, statements, signatures that looked like mine, but weren't. Jessica's face in the courtroom, pale with terror. The judge's expression when he'd opened that folder. Shock giving way to disgust, giving way to something that looked almost like pity. Pity for me. The man who'd been too blind to see his own life being dismantled. My apartment felt different now. Wrong. Like I was seeing it for the first time. Or maybe seeing it clearly for the first time. The couch we'd picked out together. Had I paid for it? The coffee table, the lamps, the artwork on the walls. What had been mine, and what had been bought with stolen money? With my stolen money. I walked through the rooms like a ghost haunting his own life. The bedroom where we'd slept together for 8 years. The closet where her clothes still hung, though she'd been staying at her father's house for the past month. The bathroom where her makeup still cluttered the counter. Her shampoo still sat in the shower. Evidence of a life we'd shared. Or a life I'd thought we'd shared. I found myself in my office. The spare bedroom I'd converted into a workspace. My computer, my desk, my books. This room, at least, had been mine. Untouched. A sanctuary from the deception that had apparently infected every other corner of my existence. I sat down at the desk and opened my laptop. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, not knowing what I was looking for. Then I typed her name into the search bar. Jessica Marie Hartwell. Nothing unusual appeared. Her LinkedIn profile, professionally curated. Her Instagram, set to private now, though I could still see the profile picture. Her smiling at a beach somewhere, sun-kissed and beautiful. A few articles mentioning her father's company, Hartwell Enterprises, with her name in passing at charity events. Nothing that suggested fraud. Nothing that hinted at offshore accounts or forged signatures or systematic theft. But then again, that's how people like her operated, wasn't it? Clean surfaces, perfect appearances, the rot hidden beneath layers of respectability and charm. I tried searching for Richard Hartwell next. More results, many more. Articles about business deals, real estate developments, political donations. Photos of him shaking hands with mayors, governors, senators. A man of influence, a man of power. A man who'd helped his daughter steal nearly $300,000 from her husband. I kept scrolling, not really knowing what I was looking for until something caught my eye. An article from 6 years ago, local business section, small headline, Hartwell Enterprises settles lawsuit. I clicked. The article was brief, mostly legal jargon, but the gist was clear. A former business partner had sued Richard Hartwell for breach of contract and misappropriation of funds. The case had been settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. Both parties agreed to a non-disclosure agreement. Misappropriation of funds. The words echoed in my head. I searched for more. Found another article, this one from 8 years ago. Employee files complaint against Hartwell Enterprises. Another settlement, another NDA, and another 10 years back. Investor group questions Hartwell's accounting practices. Resolved. Settled. Swept under the rug. A pattern. Richard Hartwell was good at making problems disappear. Good at using money and lawyers and influence to bury inconvenient truths. And he'd taught his daughter well. But this time, someone had decided not to let the truth stay buried. Someone had compiled evidence too solid to dismiss, too comprehensive to settle, too damning to ignore. Who? I glanced at the clock. 3:47 a.m. In 8 hours, I would find out. Harbor Park was one of those places cities built to pretend they cared about nature. A manufactured slice of greenery wedged between office buildings and apartment complexes, complete with winding paths, manicured flower beds, and a fountain in the center that was supposed to evoke serenity but mostly just reminded people that real parks had trees older than their grandparents. David and I arrived 15 minutes early. "Stay close," he said, scanning the area with the wariness of someone who'd watched too many crime shows. "If anything feels wrong, we leave immediately." Agreed. There were other people in the park, joggers, dog walkers, a young couple sharing coffee on a bench. Normal Saturday morning activity. Nothing suspicious, nothing threatening, and yet my heart was racing. We positioned ourselves near the fountain, a circular marble structure with water cascading from a central pillar. The sound should have been calming. Instead, it felt like static, white noise drowning out my ability to think clearly. "What if they don't show?" I asked. "Then we go to the police with what we have," David said. "The documents are enough. You don't need this person's help to press charges." But I did need them. Not for the charges, for the answers. For the truth about what had really happened to my life. Noon arrived, then 12:01, 12:02. "Daniel," David said quietly, "someone's coming." I turned. A woman was walking toward us along the main path. She was tall, maybe late 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Professional attire, blazer, slacks, sensible shoes. She carried a leather messenger bag over one shoulder and wore sunglasses despite the overcast sky. She walked with purpose. Not hurried, but deliberate. Like someone who knew exactly where they were going and what they were going to do when they got there. "Mr. Chen," she said as she approached. Her voice was measured, controlled. "Thank you for coming." "Who are you?" I asked. She smiled slightly. "Someone who knows what it's like to be betrayed by people you trusted. But introductions can wait." Her eyes shifted to David. I said, "Come alone." "He's my lawyer," I said. "If you know as much about me as you claim, you know I hired him. He stays." She studied David for a moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. Though I should tell you, Mr. Park, that attorney-client privilege won't protect you from what I'm about to share. This goes beyond a simple divorce case." "I'm aware," David said coolly, "and I'm staying." "Suit yourself." She gestured toward a bench partially hidden by a grove of ornamental trees. "Let's sit. This will take a while." We followed her to the bench. She sat first, setting her bag beside her. David and I sat across from her, a small table between us that someone had probably placed there for chess games or casual lunches. Now, it felt like an interrogation room. My name is Catherine, the woman said, removing her sunglasses. Her eyes were gray-green, sharp, and assessing. Catherine Reeves, though that name won't mean anything to you, not yet. You sent the documents, I said. I compiled them, she corrected. I sent them to Mr. Park because I knew you'd need professional representation, and I knew you couldn't afford the kind of lawyer who'd bury evidence like this. No offense, Mr. Park. None taken, David said, though his jaw was tight. How did you get access to private financial records? I have resources, Catherine said simply. Contacts, people who owe me favors. It took 3 months to gather everything, verify it, organize it. I wanted to make sure there were no gaps, no room for doubt. 3 months, I repeated. You've been investigating my wife for 3 months? Longer, actually, but the active investigation, the document gathering that took 3 months. She leaned back, crossing her legs. I've been watching Jessica Hartwell for 2 years. The words hung in the air like smoke. Why? I asked. Why would you spend 2 years watching someone you don't know? Why go through all this effort for a stranger? Catherine's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, something dark. Because she's not the first, she said quietly. And you're not the first victim. David and I exchanged glances. What do you mean? I asked. Catherine reached into her bag and pulled out a tablet. She tapped the screen a few times, then turned it to face us. Do you know this man? The photo showed a young man, maybe early 30s, with sandy hair and a kind face. He was smiling at the camera, holding what looked like a diploma or certificate. Happy, proud. No, I said. I've never seen him before. His name was Michael Brennan, Catherine said. Was. He killed himself 3 years ago. The words hit like a slap. He was engaged to Jessica Hartwell, she continued, for 2 years before you met her. They were planning a wedding. He was an engineer, worked for a tech startup that had just gone public. Made good money. Not rich, but comfortable, stable. She swiped to the next image. A document. A coroner's report. Michael hanged himself in his apartment, Catherine said, her voice flat, clinical. The police report listed it as suicide due to financial stress. He'd lost his job. His savings were gone. His credit was destroyed. He left a note apologizing for being a failure. I felt sick. Jessica broke off the engagement 3 months before his death, Catherine continued. Said she couldn't be with someone who couldn't provide stability. She moved back in with her father. Michael spiraled, and then he died. She swiped again. Another document. Bank statements. 6 months after his death, an audit of Michael's finances revealed irregularities. Someone had opened credit accounts in his name. Someone had forged his signature on loan documents. Someone had systematically drained his assets over the course of their relationship. Jessica, I whispered. Jessica, Catherine confirmed. But by then, she was gone. The accounts were closed. The money had been moved offshore, and Michael was dead, so he couldn't testify or press charges. The investigation went nowhere. The case was closed. I couldn't breathe. There was another one before Michael, Catherine said softly, and another before that. Different methods, different timelines, but the same pattern. Jessica targets men with stable incomes and no family wealth, men who work hard, save money, build something. She marries them or gets engaged to them. She spends years slowly stealing everything they have, and then she leaves, and they're left with nothing but debt and shame. How many? David asked, his voice tight. Catherine's eyes were cold. 5 that I've been able to confirm, including Daniel. But I suspect there are more. 5 men, 5 lives destroyed, and one of them had died because of it. Why hasn't she been arrested? I demanded. If you have proof. Proof is complicated, Catherine said. Michael's case was closed as suicide. The financial irregularities were noted, but never pursued because there was no one to bring charges. The others, some settled quietly. Some didn't realize the full extent of what happened until years later. And Richard Hartwell is very good at making problems disappear. But now, David said slowly, you have Daniel, and he's alive, and he's willing to press charges. Exactly. Catherine leaned forward. You're the first victim who caught her in the act, Daniel. The first one where the evidence is undeniable and immediate. This is our chance, your chance, to stop her, to make sure she doesn't do this to anyone else. Our chance. The words felt loaded. You keep saying our, I said. Why do you care about this? How do you know so much about Jessica's history? Catherine was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached up and unbuttoned the top of her blazer, pulling it aside to reveal a thin silver necklace. Hanging from it was a man's college ring, worn and tarnished. Michael Brennan was my brother, she said. Everything clicked into place. The meticulous investigation, the 2 years of watching, the carefully compiled evidence. This wasn't about justice for a stranger. This was revenge. I'm sorry, I said and meant it. Catherine's hand closed around the ring. He was a good person, kind, trusting. He believed in people. He believed in her, and she destroyed him for profit. Catherine, David said gently, grief is understandable. But if you're using Daniel's case to pursue a personal vendetta, this isn't a vendetta, Catherine snapped, her composure cracking for the first time. This is justice. My brother died thinking he was a failure, thinking he'd ruined his own life. He didn't know someone else had done it to him. He didn't know he was a victim, and I couldn't save him. She looked at me, and I saw it then, the raw pain beneath her controlled exterior. But I can help you, she said. I can make sure what happened to Michael doesn't happen to you. I can make sure Jessica pays for all of it, not just what happened in that courtroom yesterday. What do you mean, all of it? I asked. Catherine pulled out her tablet again. This time she opened a folder filled with files, dozens of them, hundreds. The documents I sent to your lawyer were just the beginning, she said. They were enough to stop the divorce and trigger a criminal investigation. But there's more, so much more. She opened a file, another bank statement, another set of wire transfers. Richard Hartwell's company is a shell, Catherine said. He moves money through it, money from questionable sources, real estate deals that don't quite add up, political contributions that skirt campaign finance laws. He's been doing it for years, and Jessica's been helping him. The offshore accounts she set up in her name, they're not just for her stolen funds. They're part of her father's network. Money laundering, David said. Among other things, Catherine confirmed. Tax evasion, bribery, fraud on a scale that makes what she did to you look like petty theft. I stared at the documents, my mind struggling to process the scope of what she was describing. If this is true, David said carefully, this is federal. This is FBI territory. Why are you showing us instead of going to the authorities? Catherine smiled thinly. Because the authorities are slow, and they're careful, and by the time they build a case that might stick, Richard Hartwell will have buried the evidence and paid off the right people to make it disappear. He's done it before. So what are you suggesting? I asked. She looked at me directly. I'm suggesting we finish this. Properly. Completely. I give you everything I have. All the evidence, all the documentation, all the connections. You work with your lawyer to bring charges not just against Jessica, but against her father. You become the catalyst that brings down their entire operation. That's insane, David said. Daniel isn't an investigator. He's not law enforcement. He's a victim trying to rebuild his life. He's also the one person who can make this stick, Catherine countered, because he's not just another victim they can silence or settle with. He's the one who walked into a courtroom and exposed them publicly. He's the one whose case is already on the record. He's the leverage we need." "We," I said. "There's that word again." Catherine didn't flinch. "I've spent 2 years of my life on this. I've used every resource I have, called in every favor, spent thousands of dollars investigating these people. I'm not doing this for fun, Daniel. I'm doing this because my brother deserved better. And so do you, and so does everyone else they'll target if we don't stop them." The fountain behind us continued its steady cascade, water rushing over stone, constant and indifferent. I thought about Michael Brennan, about the other men whose names I didn't know, but whose stories probably mirrored mine. Betrayal, theft, devastation. Men who'd trusted the wrong person and paid for it with their futures. I thought about Jessica, sitting in a cell somewhere, probably already being bailed out by her father's lawyers. And I thought about that folder, that perfect, devastating, impossible folder that had appeared at exactly the right moment and saved my life. "If I do this," I said slowly, "if I agree to help you, what exactly are you asking me to do?" Catherine smiled, and for the first time since I'd met her, it reached her eyes. "I'm asking you to be brave," she said. "I'm asking you to trust me the way you once trusted her, and I'm asking you to help me make sure that what happened to my brother never happens to anyone else." She extended her hand across the table. "Will you help me, Daniel?" I looked at David. He was shaking his head slightly, a warning in his eyes. But I wasn't looking for permission. I was looking for truth. And Catherine Reeves, whoever she really was, whatever her real motives might be, she had given me more truth in the past 24 hours than I'd had in 8 years of marriage. I took her hand. "Yes," I said. "I'll help you." Catherine didn't let go of my hand immediately. She held it for a moment longer than necessary, her grip firm, her eyes searching mine as if trying to determine whether I truly understood what I'd just agreed to. Then she released me and sat back, pulling her tablet closer. "Good," she said simply. "Then we start now." David shifted beside me, clearly uncomfortable. "Catherine, I need to advise my client that this is dangerous," Catherine interrupted, "that it could backfire, that he's opening himself up to retaliation from people with resources and connections. I know, Mr. Park. I've thought about all of that, obsessively, for 2 years. Then you know I can in good conscience support. You don't have to support it," she said, her voice sharp but not unkind. "You just have to do your job, represent Daniel in the criminal proceedings against Jessica, file the charges, build the case. Let the system do what it's supposed to do." "And what will you be doing?" David asked. Catherine's smile was cold. "Everything the system can't." She turned the tablet toward us again, opening a new folder. This one was labeled simply, Hartwell Enterprises, Structure. "Richard Hartwell's company is a labyrinth," she began, her tone shifting into something more clinical, more professional, like a professor delivering a lecture. "On the surface, it's a legitimate real estate development firm. They build commercial properties, manage rental portfolios, broker deals. But underneath," she pulled up a diagram, an intricate web of connected entities, subsidiaries, shell companies, offshore accounts. Names I'd never heard of, registered in places I'd never been. Panama, Cayman Islands, Singapore, Isle of Man. "Underneath," she continued, "it's a mechanism for moving money, specifically money that can't be moved through traditional channels." "Whose money?" I asked. "Investors who don't want their investments traced. Business partners who need to hide assets from ex-spouses, or creditors, or the IRS. Political donors who've maxed out their legal contribution limits but want to give more. Richard Hartwell facilitates all of it for a fee." She zoomed in on one particular shell company, Meridian Holdings, LLC. "This one is registered in Delaware, but it's managed from an office in the Caymans. Jessica is listed as the registered agent, has been for 6 years. 6 years. That would have been 2 years into our marriage. What does a registered agent do? I asked. In legitimate business, they receive legal documents on behalf of the company. In this context, Catherine's eyes were hard. They provide a layer of separation between the company's activities and the people who actually control it. Jessica's name is on the paperwork, but she doesn't make decisions. She's a firewall. If anything illegal gets discovered, she takes the fall while her father walks away clean. Except she won't take the fall alone, David said quietly, because you're building a case that connects her activities to his. Exactly. Catherine pulled up another document, an email chain. This is correspondence between Jessica and an attorney in Singapore. They're discussing the establishment of a trust. Look at the date. I looked. 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks before our divorce hearing. She was preparing, Catherine said. Moving assets into structures that would be harder to trace, harder to seize. If your divorce had gone the way she planned, she would have taken everything from you and hidden it so thoroughly that even if you'd somehow discovered the theft later, you'd never be able to recover it. The words settled over me like a weight. She'd been planning my destruction right up until the moment it all fell apart. How did you get these emails? David asked. Catherine hesitated, just for a second. I told you I have resources. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I'm giving. Her tone left no room for argument. What matters is that they're real, verifiable, and they demonstrate conspiracy and intent. David looked like he wanted to press the issue, but I spoke first. What do you need from me? I asked. You said I'm the leverage. How? Catherine closed the email folder and opened another one. This time, the documents looked different, older, more formal, legal contracts. When you married Jessica, she said, did you sign a prenuptial agreement? No, she said she didn't believe in them. Said they were for people who didn't trust each other. Catherine's laugh was bitter. Of course she did, because a prenup would have protected you, would have kept your assets separate, would have made it much harder for her to steal from you. She pulled up a different document. But you did sign this. I looked at the screen. It was a power of attorney form, my signature at the bottom, dated 5 years ago. I don't remember signing this, I said slowly. It was hidden in a stack of mortgage refinancing documents, Catherine explained. Standard practice for her. Bury the important paper in a pile of routine paperwork. Get you to sign everything at once without reading carefully. What does it give her power to do? Everything. Access your accounts. Sign contracts on your behalf. Make financial decisions in your name. It's a blank check, Daniel, and she's been using it. The room felt smaller suddenly, suffocating. But here's the important part, Catherine continued. This power of attorney, it's still active. You never revoked it. I didn't know I'd signed it, I said. I know, but that doesn't matter legally. What matters is that, right now, in this moment, you still have the legal authority to grant someone else power of attorney, to essentially transfer her access to someone you trust. I stared at her. You. Me, she confirmed. Or more specifically, an attorney I work with who specializes in financial recovery. Someone who can use that authority to freeze assets, trace transfers, lock down accounts before they disappear completely. That's, David started, then stopped. That's aggressive. It's survival, Catherine shot back. Richard Hartwell is moving money as we speak. The moment Jessica was arrested, he started damage control. By Monday, half of those offshore accounts will be emptied and restructured under new names. By next week, the paper trail will be so convoluted that it'll take years to untangle, if it can be untangled at all. But if Daniel signs over power of attorney to your associate, David said carefully, he's essentially giving a stranger control over his financial life. How is that any different from what Jessica did? Because I'm not stealing from him, Catherine said. Her voice was steady, but I heard the anger underneath. I'm trying to save what's left. I'm trying to recover what was taken. And yes, it requires trust. Yes, it requires taking a risk, but the alternative is watching everything disappear while we wait for the legal system to catch up. She turned to me. Daniel, I need you to understand something. What happened in that courtroom yesterday? That was a victory, a huge one. But it was just the opening move. Jessica's been arrested, but she'll be out on bail within hours if she isn't already. Her father has lawyers, good ones, and they're going to fight every charge, dispute every document, delay every proceeding. They'll tie this up in court for years. Then what's the point? I asked. If they can just delay indefinitely. The point is that we don't let them, Catherine interrupted. We move faster. We're smarter. We use the tools they taught us, the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the legal loopholes, and we turn them against them. She leaned forward, and her intensity was almost frightening. You want justice? Real justice? Then we can't just rely on the courts. We have to make them feel what you felt, what my brother felt. We have to take everything they stole and make sure they never get it back. The fountain behind us seemed louder suddenly. Or maybe it was just my heart pounding in my ears. David touched my arm. Daniel, I need to speak with you privately. Catherine nodded. Take your time. This isn't a decision to make lightly. We stood and walked a short distance away, far enough that Catherine couldn't hear us, but close enough that I could still see her sitting at the table, her fingers moving across her tablet screen. This is a bad idea, David said immediately, but you don't trust her. I don't know her, and neither do you. Yes, she provided the evidence that saved you in court, but Daniel, think about what she's asking. She wants you to sign over financial authority to someone she works with, someone you've never met. She's talking about aggressive asset recovery that could border on illegal, and she's doing all of this in the name of her dead brother. You think she's lying about Michael? I think she's grieving, David said, and grief makes people do extreme things, sometimes justified things, sometimes not. She's right about the Hartwells running, I said. You saw those documents. You know they'll try to hide everything. Yes, probably. But there are legal ways to prevent that. We can petition the court for asset freezes. We can work with the DA's office to seize accounts pending the criminal investigation. It'll take time, but by then it'll be too late, I finished. That's what you're not saying. By the time the legal system moves, everything will be gone. David was quiet. I'm right, aren't I? I pressed. Probably, he admitted. But Daniel, even if Catherine is being honest about her intentions, even if her associate is legitimate, you're putting yourself at enormous risk. If anything she does crosses the line into illegal activity, you could be held liable. You could lose your case. You could end up charged alongside Jessica. Or I could get my life back, I said. Is that what this is about? David asked. Getting your life back? Or is this about revenge? The question hung between us. Was it revenge? I thought about Jessica's face in the courtroom. The terror when she realized her carefully constructed lies had been exposed. The humiliation of being led away in zip-tie handcuffs. Had that felt good? Yes. God help me. Yes, it had. But this wasn't about that. Or it wasn't only about that. It's about making sure she can't do it again, I said finally. Michael Brennan killed himself because of what she did to him. How many others are out there? How many other men did she destroy who we don't even know about? That's not your responsibility, David said gently. Maybe not, but it's my opportunity. Catherine's right. I'm the first victim who caught her in the act. The first one with documented, undeniable proof. If I walk away now, if I just let the courts handle it at their own pace, Jessica and her father will slip through the cracks. They'll delay and obfuscate and eventually settle for some reduced charge that doesn't reflect what they actually did. You don't know that. Yes, I do. You told me about Richard Hartwell's history, all those lawsuits that disappeared, all those settlements with NDAs attached. This is what they do, David. They make problems go away. I looked back at Catherine, still sitting alone at the table. She's not asking me to do anything illegal, I said. She's asking me to trust her, to take a risk. And yeah, maybe it's a stupid risk. Maybe it'll blow up in my face. But at least I'll have tried, David sighed. If you do this, I can't protect you from the consequences. I know. I'll represent you in the criminal case against Jessica. I'll file every motion, fight every battle, do everything I can within the bounds of the law. But whatever Catherine does, whatever her associate does with that power of attorney, I can't be part of that. I understand. He studied my face for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. Okay, he said, but I want to meet this associate. I want to verify their credentials, their reputation, and I want documentation of everything they do with your authority. Everything. If this goes sideways, we need a paper trail that shows you were acting in good faith. Agreed. We walked back to the table. Catherine looked up, her expression carefully neutral. Have you decided? I want to meet your associate, I said, the one you want me to give power of attorney to, and I want documentation of everything they do on my behalf. Done, Catherine said immediately. Her name is Elena Martinez. She's a forensic accountant and asset recovery specialist, former FBI. She left the Bureau 3 years ago to work in the private sector specifically because she got tired of watching white-collar criminals escape through legal technicalities. She sounds perfect, David said dryly. Catherine ignored the sarcasm. She's available to meet this afternoon if you're free. Her office is downtown. This afternoon, I repeated. You already set this up. You knew I'd say yes. I hoped you would, Catherine corrected, but I was prepared for either answer. If you'd said no, I would have thanked you for your time and continued my investigation alone. It would have been slower, harder, but I would have found another way. To do what? I asked. What's your endgame here, Catherine? Is it really just about stopping them from hurting anyone else? Her hand went to the ring around her neck again, an unconscious gesture, I thought, a touchstone. My brother died thinking he was worthless, she said quietly. The note he left. It wasn't just an apology. It was a confession. He listed every way he thought he'd failed, every mistake he thought he'd made. He took responsibility for his own destruction because he didn't know someone else had orchestrated it. She looked at me, and I saw tears in her eyes for the first time. I want them to feel that, she said. I want Jessica and her father to lose everything the way Michael did. I want them to stand in the wreckage of their own lives and understand what they did to other people. And I want them to know that it was their own greed, their own cruelty that destroyed them. That's revenge, David said. Yes, Catherine agreed. It is, but it's also justice. Sometimes those things look the same. She wiped her eyes quickly, her composure reasserting itself. But to answer your question, Daniel, my end game is exposure, complete exposure. I want every shell company, every offshore account, every illegal transaction documented and made public. I want Richard Hartwell's business empire to collapse. I want Jessica's name to become synonymous with fraud. I want them both in prison, and I want everyone who ever considered working with them to know exactly what they are. That's ambitious, I said. It's necessary, she replied, because people like them rely on silence, on victims being too ashamed to come forward, on the system being too slow to catch them. They rely on people like you choosing the safe path, pressing charges, hoping for the best, moving on with their lives. She stood, gathering her tablet. But you didn't choose the safe path, Daniel. You came here. You listened. And now you're going to help me make sure that what happened to my brother, what happened to you, never happens again." She extended her hand again. "Elena's office is at 450 Market Street, Suite 2200. 2 o'clock. Don't be late." I shook her hand. "We'll be there," I said. Catherine left first, walking away through the park with the same purposeful stride she'd arrived with. David and I stayed by the fountain, neither of us speaking for several minutes. Finally, David broke the silence. "You know this is insane, right?" "Yes." "And you're doing it anyway?" "Yes." He shook his head, but he was almost smiling. "Your funeral?" "Hopefully not literally." "Hopefully," he agreed. "Come on. If we're meeting this Elena Martinez at 2, we should grab lunch first. You're going to need your strength." We started walking toward the park exit. The morning clouds had cleared, and sun broke through in patches, warming the paths, making the fountain sparkle. Behind us, water continued its endless cascade, and I thought, this is what it feels like to step off a cliff. The moment when your feet leave solid ground, and there's nothing beneath you but air and faith, and the terrifying hope that you'll somehow learn to fly before you hit the bottom. Jessica had pushed me off that cliff 8 years ago. She just hadn't realized I'd survived the fall. Elena Martinez's office didn't look like the headquarters of a financial revenge operation. It looked like any other professional suite in downtown San Francisco. Clean lines, minimalist furniture, diplomas on the wall. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, you could see the bay in the distance, sailboats drifting across gray-blue water like scattered thoughts. The receptionist, a young man with impeccable posture and a careful smile, showed us to a conference room and offered coffee. David accepted. I declined. My stomach was already twisted into knots. Adding caffeine seemed like a bad idea. "Ms. Martinez will be with you shortly," the receptionist said, closing the door behind him. David and I sat in silence. The conference room was sparse, a long table, 8 chairs, a whiteboard on one wall, clean and unused. No personal touches, no photographs or artwork, just professional emptiness. "Last chance to change your mind," David said quietly. "I'm not changing my mind." "Okay," he sipped his coffee. "But when this goes wrong, and I'm not saying it will, but if it does, remember that I advised against it." Duly noted. The door opened. Elena Martinez entered, and immediately I understood why Catherine had chosen her. She moved with the kind of contained energy that suggested she was always thinking 3 steps ahead, always calculating, always aware. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with dark hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that assessed us in the span of a heartbeat. "Mr. Chen, Mr. Park." She shook our hands with a grip that was firm but not aggressive. "Thank you for coming. Catherine told me you'd be here, but I wasn't entirely convinced you'd show." "Why wouldn't we?" I asked. She smiled slightly. "Because most people, when confronted with the option of taking an aggressive approach to recovering their stolen assets, choose the safe route, the legal route. They trust the system to work, even when the system has repeatedly demonstrated that it doesn't work for people like you." "People like me," I repeated. "People who've been targeted by sophisticated financial predators," Elena clarified. She sat down across from us, placing a slim folder on the table. "People who don't have the resources to fight back using traditional methods. People who need someone willing to bend the rules without breaking them." "And that's what you do?" David asked. His tone was polite but skeptical. "Bend rules?" "I navigate gray areas," Elena said. "The law is vast and complex, Mr. Park. There are cracks in it, spaces between what's explicitly illegal and what's simply creative. I operate in those spaces." "That's a concerning answer," David said. "It's an honest one." Elena opened her folder. "Let me be very clear about what I do and don't do. I don't forge documents. I don't hack into systems. I don't bribe officials or intimidate witnesses. Everything I do is either legal or exists in a space where legality is ambiguous enough that prosecutors won't pursue it. Ambiguous, right? I said. Ambiguous, she confirmed. For example, is it legal for someone with power of attorney to transfer assets from accounts that have been used for fraudulent purposes into secure escrow accounts pending investigation? Technically, yes, if those transfers can be justified as protective measures. Is it legal to trace offshore accounts using financial records obtained through, let's call them, unconventional sources? That depends on how the records were obtained and whether they're used in court or simply as investigative tools. She looked at me directly. What I'm offering you, Daniel, is an opportunity to fight back using the same tactics that were used against you. Not illegal tactics, but aggressive ones. Tactics that people like Richard Hartwell use every day because they know most victims won't. Catherine showed me documents. I said, emails, bank records, corporate structures. How much of that can you actually use? Depends on what you mean by use, Elena said. In court, some of it. The bank records that came through official channels, those are admissible. The emails Catherine obtained through her contacts, those are trickier. We can use them to guide our investigation, to know where to look, but we'd need to obtain official versions through subpoenas or discovery. So half of what she showed me is inadmissible, David said. Half is inadmissible as direct evidence, Elena corrected, but it's incredibly valuable as a roadmap. It tells us exactly what to look for and where to find it legally. She pulled a document from her folder, a power of attorney form, already filled out with my name and her details. If you sign this, she said, I can act on your behalf to secure your assets, trace fraudulent transfers, and work with law enforcement to build a comprehensive case against Jessica and Richard Hartwell. I'll document everything I do. You'll receive weekly reports detailing every action taken, every account accessed, every transfer made. And how much will this cost? David asked. Nothing up front, Elena said. My fee is contingent on recovery. If I successfully recover stolen assets, I take 20%. If I recover nothing, you owe nothing. 20%. I did the math quickly. If she recovered even half of what Jessica had stolen, Elena would make close to $30,000. That's a significant incentive to be aggressive, David observed. It's a significant incentive to be successful, Elena countered. Aggressive tactics that fail don't recover assets. I'm good at what I do, Mr. Park, because I'm careful, methodical. I don't take unnecessary risks. She turned to me. But I need to know you understand what you're signing. This isn't passive. If I find assets that should be frozen, I'll freeze them. If I find accounts that need to be seized, I'll work with law enforcement to seize them. If I find evidence of additional crimes, I'll make sure that evidence gets to the right people. You're not just hiring an accountant, Daniel. You're hiring someone who will prosecute this case in parallel to what the DA's office does, making sure nothing falls through the cracks. The pen sat on the table between us. Black ink. Simple design, unremarkable. But signing that document would change everything. What happens if you're wrong? I asked. What if you freeze accounts that turn out to be legitimate? What if you accuse people who aren't actually involved? Then I apologize and unfreeze them, Elena said simply. But I'm rarely wrong. I've been doing this for 15 years, 7 at the FBI, 8 in private practice. I know how to verify information before acting on it. Catherine said you left the FBI because you were tired of watching criminals escape through technicalities. Elena's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Catherine has a tendency toward dramatic phrasing. The truth is simpler. I left because I could help more people in the private sector than I could, working within the constraints of federal bureaucracy. And the fact that you make more money this way? David asked. Is irrelevant to my effectiveness, Elena said coolly. But yes, I make more money. I also take on more risk. If I fail, my reputation suffers. If I cross ethical lines, I lose my license and possibly face prosecution. Those constraints keep me honest more effectively than any government oversight ever did. She leaned back in her chair. Look, I understand your skepticism. You've been burned by someone you trusted. Now strangers are asking you to trust again, and that's terrifying. But here's what I can tell you. Catherine Reeves spent 2 years investigating your wife and her father. She compiled evidence that saved you in court yesterday. She didn't ask for anything in return. She's asking now, I said. She's asking you to help her finish what she started, Elena corrected. Not for her benefit, for everyone else's, for the next person Jessica would have targeted, for the next Michael Brennan, who might not survive what she does to him. The words hit harder than I expected, because she was right. This wasn't just about me anymore. Maybe it had never been just about me. I picked up the pen. David touched my arm. Daniel, I know what I'm doing, I said. Do you? I looked at him, my lawyer, my advocate, the man who'd fought for me when I had nothing and no one. I know what she did to me, I said quietly. I know what she did to Michael Brennan. And I know that if I don't do this, she'll do it again, to someone else, someone who might not have a Catherine Reeves watching, someone who might not survive. I signed the document. Elena witnessed it, then placed it carefully back in her folder. Thank you, she said. I'll begin immediately. First step is securing your existing accounts and initiating traces on the fraudulent transfers. Second step is filing affidavits with the relevant banks to freeze the offshore accounts Catherine identified. Third step is coordinating with the DA's office to make sure our work supports their criminal investigation rather than interfering with it. How long will all this take? David asked. Depends on how cooperative the financial institutions are. Some will move quickly once they see evidence of fraud. Others will require court orders. I'd estimate we'll have preliminary results within 2 weeks. Full recovery could take months. And the Hartwells? I asked. What happens when they realize what you're doing? Elena's smile was cold. They try to stop me. They file motions. They call their lawyers. They use every tactic they know, but by then, it's too late. The money's frozen. The accounts are flagged. The evidence is preserved. She stood, extending her hand again. Welcome to the fight, Daniel. I promise you won't regret this. I shook her hand, wanting to believe her, wanting to believe that signing that paper was the right choice, that trust, even after everything, was still possible. We left Elena's office an hour later, after she'd walked us through her initial investigative plan in detail. David was quiet during the elevator ride down, his expression unreadable. On the street, he finally spoke. I hope you know what you're doing. I don't, I admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. He shook his head, but he was almost smiling. You're either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. My phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. It's Catherine. Elena told me you signed. Thank you. There's something else you need to see. Can you meet me tonight? 8 p.m. Address below. An address in Pacific Heights, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the city. I showed David the message. No, he said immediately. Absolutely not. You've already signed over power of attorney. You don't need to keep meeting with her in secret locations. She said there's something I need to see. She always says that. It's part of the manipulation. Keep you engaged, keep you curious, keep you dependent on her revelations. Or she actually has information that could help. Daniel, I'm going, I said. David stared at me for a long moment. Then he sighed. Fine, but I'm coming with you. And if this turns out to be some kind of ambush or trap, I'm allowed to say, I told you so, as many times as I want. Deal. Pacific Heights at night was a different world. Streets lined with Victorian mansions and modern architectural marvels. Cars that cost more than most people's houses. Security systems on every property. The kind of neighborhood where people didn't just have money. They had wealth, generational wealth. The kind that bought silence and influence and impunity. The address Catherine had sent led us to a 3-story Victorian painted in cream and gold, with ornate trim and a garden that probably required a full-time staff to maintain. Lights blazed from the windows on all 3 floors. "Whose house is this?" David asked as we approached the front door. "No idea." I rang the doorbell. Catherine answered almost immediately. She'd changed since this morning, traded her professional blazer for jeans and a sweater, more relaxed. Or maybe just tired. The investigation was taking its toll on her too. "Come in," she said. "We're in the study." "We?" She led us through a marble foyer, past a living room that looked like it belonged in a museum, down a hallway lined with artwork that was probably worth more than my apartment. The house felt empty despite its size. No family photos, no personal touches, just wealth on display. The study was at the back of the house, a room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather furniture, and a massive mahogany desk. Sitting behind the desk was a man I'd never seen before. He was older, maybe mid-60s, with silver hair and the kind of face that had been handsome once but had settled into distinguished. He wore an expensive suit even at 8 p.m. on a Saturday. Old money habits. He stood when we entered. "Mr. Chen," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Thomas Brennan, Michael's father." The world tilted slightly. Michael Brennan's father. Catherine had never mentioned him. Never said anything about family beyond her brother. I shook his hand numbly. "Please, sit," Thomas said, gesturing to the leather chairs facing his desk. "I apologize for the dramatic summons. Catherine felt it was important that we meet before things progress further." "Things," I repeated. "The case against Jessica and Richard Hartwell," he clarified. "My daughter has been working on this investigation for 2 years. I've been funding it." Funding it, of course. Catherine couldn't have sustained a 2-year investigation on her own, couldn't have paid for the resources, the contacts, the expertise. "How much?" David asked bluntly. "How much have you spent on this?" Thomas smiled slightly. "More than most people spend on a house, less than it would cost to let them continue operating." He moved around the desk and sat in one of the chairs beside us rather than behind the imposing desk. A deliberate choice, trying to make this feel like a conversation between equals rather than a meeting with a benefactor. "I want you to understand something, Daniel," Thomas said. "When Michael died, I thought I knew why. Financial stress, career pressure, the shame of failure, all the things the police report said, all the things that made sense." His voice wavered slightly. But Catherine didn't believe it. She knew her brother, knew he wouldn't give up that easily, so she started digging, started asking questions, and she found the truth. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. A young man in a hospital bed, painfully thin, tubes and wires and monitors. "This is Michael, 3 months before he died," Thomas said. "He'd stopped eating, stopped sleeping. He'd lost 40 pounds. His friends tried to help, but he pushed everyone away, said he didn't deserve their concern." Another photo. Michael at graduation, smiling, full of life. The contrast was devastating. "Jessica Hartwell destroyed my son," Thomas said, his voice hardening. "She systematically stole everything he had, then convinced him it was his own fault. And when he couldn't take it anymore, when the weight of all those lies crushed him, he hanged himself." He looked at me directly. "I will not let that happen to anyone else. I will not let her move on to another victim. I will not let Richard Hartwell use his money and influence to make this disappear like he's made every other scandal disappear." "So you're funding Catherine's investigation," David said, "and you're funding Elena Martinez's work." "Yes." "And what do you want in return?" I asked. Thomas was quiet for a moment. I want them in prison, he said finally. Both of them, Jessica and her father. I want them to lose everything. Their freedom, their wealth, their reputation. I want the world to know what they are. That's revenge, David said. Yes, Thomas agreed. It is, but it's also justice. Sometimes those things look the same. Catherine's words, repeated by her father, a family philosophy. Daniel, Thomas continued, you're the catalyst we need. You're the victim with unassailable evidence caught in the act. But more than that, you're alive. You survived what Jessica did to you. My son didn't. His voice broke on the last word. I can't bring Michael back, he said, but I can make sure no other father has to bury their child because of people like the Hartwells. That's what I'm asking you to help me do. The study was silent, except for the ticking of an antique clock on the mantel. You've already signed the power of attorney, Catherine said. Elena's already started working, but there's more we need from you. What more? I asked. She pulled out her tablet and opened a video file. We need you to go public, she said. The video showed a press conference, a podium with microphones, cameras flashing. We need you to tell your story, not in a courtroom, not through lawyers, but directly to the media. We need you to stand up in front of cameras and explain exactly what Jessica and Richard Hartwell did to you. That's insane, David said immediately. That could prejudice the criminal case. Or it could ensure the criminal case doesn't get buried, Catherine interrupted. Richard Hartwell has connections. He donates to politicians. He plays golf with judges. He knows how to make problems disappear quietly. But if Daniel goes public, if this becomes a media story, it becomes much harder to sweep under the rug. It also makes Daniel a target, David countered. He's already a target, Catherine said. The moment that folder was opened in court, the moment Jessica was arrested, Daniel became a target. Going public doesn't change that. It just ensures there are witnesses watching what happens next. I looked at the video on her tablet. An empty podium waiting for someone to step up to it. Waiting for me. When? I asked. Monday morning, Catherine said. I've already contacted several media outlets. They're very interested in a story about financial fraud, identity theft, and a pattern of victims. This has everything they love: wealthy villains, sympathetic victims, evidence that can't be disputed. You arranged this before asking me, I said. I arranged it in case you agreed, Catherine corrected. If you say no, I'll cancel it. But Daniel, this is how we win, not just in court, but in the court of public opinion. This is how we make sure they can't escape. She looked at her father. Thomas Brennan nodded slowly. And I realized this had been planned all along. The folder, the evidence, Elena Martinez, the power of attorney, all of it building to this moment. To me, standing in front of cameras and becoming the face of something bigger than just my divorce. I need to think about it, I said. Of course, Catherine said, but I need an answer by tomorrow night. The press conference is scheduled for Monday at 10 a.m., with or without you. She stood. Thank you for coming. And thank you for trusting us this far. I know it's not easy. Thomas walked us to the door. My son believed the best in people, he said quietly. It got him killed. I hope you're more careful, Daniel. I hope you survive what we're about to do. The door closed behind us. David and I stood on the sidewalk in Pacific Heights, surrounded by wealth and silence. You're not seriously considering this, David said. But I was. God help me, I was. I didn't go home that night. Couldn't face the apartment. Our apartment, though, I was starting to realize it had never really been ours at all. Every piece of furniture, every decoration, every carefully chosen detail was now suspect, contaminated by the knowledge that it might have been purchased with stolen money. My stolen money. Instead, I checked into a hotel. Nothing fancy. just a Holiday Inn near the waterfront where the room smelled like industrial cleaning solution and the ice machine hummed in the hallway like a mechanical heart. David had wanted to stay with me, to make sure I was okay, to keep arguing against the press conference probably. But I'd sent him home. I needed to think. Alone. In silence. The room had a single window overlooking the parking lot. I stood there for a long time, watching cars come and go, watching people check in and check out, their lives continuing in neat, normal patterns, while mine had been torn apart and reassembled into something unrecognizable. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Call me when you can. I heard something on the news about your case. Are you all right?" The news. Of course it had made the news. A divorce hearing interrupted by evidence of fraud, a woman arrested in court. That was exactly the kind of story local media loved. I hadn't thought about my mother seeing it, hadn't thought about having to explain. I called her. She answered on the first ring. "Daniel, oh, thank God, I've been so worried." "I'm okay, Mom," I said. The lie came automatically. I wasn't okay. Nothing about any of this was okay. But what else could I say? The news said Jessica was arrested. They said something about fraud and identity theft. "Daniel, what happened?" I sat down on the bed, suddenly exhausted. "It's complicated. Try me." So I did. I told her about the divorce filing, about Jessica demanding the apartment and the car and the savings, about the folder that appeared in court, about the credit cards and the loans and the offshore accounts. I didn't tell her about Catherine, or Elena Martinez, or Thomas Brennan and his empty mansion in Pacific Heights. Some truths were too heavy to share. When I finished, my mother was quiet for a long time. "I never liked her," she finally said. Despite everything, I almost laughed. "You never said anything." "Of course I didn't. You loved her. You were happy. Or I thought you were happy. Was any of it real, Daniel? Did she ever actually love you?" The question I'd been avoiding. "I don't know," I admitted. "I've been asking myself that for the past 2 days, trying to remember if there were signs I missed, red flags I ignored. But Mom, I can't tell anymore what was real and what was performance." "That's what people like her do," my mother said, her voice hard in a way I rarely heard. "They make you doubt your own perception. They make you think you're crazy for questioning them. It's abuse, Daniel. Financial abuse. Emotional abuse. Abuse." I'd been thinking of it as theft, as fraud, as crime. But my mother was right. It was abuse. "There's something else," I said. "Something I need your advice on." I told her about the press conference, about Catherine's request, about standing in front of cameras and making my private nightmare public. "Do you want to do it?" she asked. "I don't know. Part of me thinks it's the right thing, that going public will protect me, protect other people, make sure this doesn't get buried. But another part is terrified," she finished. "Yes. Of what? Of being judged? Of people seeing you as a victim? Maybe. I spent 8 years building a life, building a reputation, being the guy who had his act together. And now, everyone will know I was being robbed blind while I smiled and paid the bills. Everyone will know you were targeted by a predator," my mother corrected. "Everyone will know you survived. Daniel, there's no shame in being a victim of a crime. The shame belongs to the person who committed it." "I know that intellectually, but you don't feel it," she said. "I understand. When your father left, when I found out about the other woman, about the money he'd hidden, I felt the same way. Embarrassed, stupid, like I should have known. I'd forgotten about that. Or maybe I'd never fully understood it. I'd been a teenager when my parents divorced, too wrapped up in my own adolescent drama to recognize my mother's pain for what it was." "How did you get through it?" I asked. "I stopped hiding," she said simply. "I stopped pretending everything was fine. I told my friends what happened. I told my family. And you know what? Most of them had their own stories. their own betrayals, their own moments of trusting the wrong person. It didn't make the pain go away, but it made me feel less alone. Less alone. The words resonated. If you do this press conference, my mother continued, you'll be telling the truth. That's powerful, Daniel. And it's scary. But truth is the only thing they can't take from you. We talked for another 20 minutes. About practicalities, about next steps, about whether she should come stay with me for a while. I told her not yet. I needed space to process, to figure out who I was now that everything I'd thought I knew had been revealed as illusion. After we hung up, I lay back on the hotel bed and stared at the ceiling. The popcorn texture reminded me of the apartment Jessica and I had first looked at together 8 years ago. We'd laughed about the ugly ceiling, made jokes about covering it with fabric or painting it black. In the end, we'd kept it. A reminder, she'd said, not to take ourselves too seriously. Had she been laughing at me even then? Planning this even then? My phone buzzed again. This time it was Catherine. I know you're still deciding, but there's someone I want you to talk to before you make your final choice. Can you meet tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., coffee shop on Mission Street? I almost didn't respond. Almost turned off my phone and let the world disappear for a few hours. But curiosity won. It always did. Who? I texted back. Her response came immediately. Another survivor. The coffee shop was called Grounded. Ironic name, given how untethered I felt. It was one of those places that tried too hard to be quirky. Mismatched furniture, local art on the walls, a chalkboard menu with hand-drawn illustrations. On a normal Sunday morning, I might have found it charming. Today, it just felt exhausting. Catherine was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table in the back corner with another woman I didn't recognize. This woman was younger than Catherine, maybe early 30s, with auburn hair and nervous hands that wouldn't stay still. She was pretty in an understated way, but there was something fragile about her. Something that suggested she'd been broken and put back together, but not quite right. The pieces didn't line up perfectly anymore. Daniel, Catherine said, standing, this is Emma Torres. Emma stood too, extending her hand. Her grip was weak, uncertain. Thank you for meeting me, she said. Her voice was soft, barely audible over the espresso machine hissing in the background. We sat. Catherine ordered coffee for all of us, then excused herself. I'll give you two some privacy. I'll be outside. And then she was gone, leaving me alone with this stranger who looked at me with eyes that understood too much. Catherine told me what happened to you, Emma said, in court, with Jessica. She told me about you too, I said. Though that was a lie. Catherine hadn't told me anything except that Emma was another survivor. How did you know Jessica? I didn't know Jessica, Emma said. I knew her father. My stomach dropped. Richard Hartwell, she continued, her hands wrapping around her coffee cup like she needed its warmth. He was my boss. I worked at Hartwell Enterprises for 3 years, executive assistant. I was good at my job, really good. Richard trusted me with everything. His calendar, his correspondence, his travel arrangements, his secrets. She took a sip of coffee. Her hands were shaking. I thought I was lucky, she said. Thought I'd landed my dream job. Good salary, great benefits, room to grow. Richard was demanding but fair, or so I thought. What happened? Emma's laugh was bitter. What always happens? I noticed things. Small things at first. Discrepancies in the books. Wire transfers that didn't match the stated purposes. Invoices for services that were never rendered. I thought maybe it was just accounting errors, so I mentioned it to Richard. She set down her coffee cup. He thanked me for being so observant, said he'd look into it. Then he gave me a raise, told me I had a bright future with the company. But he didn't fix the discrepancies, I said. No, he covered them up, and he made me part of the cover-up, slowly, carefully. He'd ask me to adjust dates on documents, to file things under different categories, to create paper trails that made illegal transactions look legitimate, always with reasonable explanations, always making it seem like I was helping solve problems rather than creating them. I thought about the tax fraud, the false documentation, the systematic creation of a fictional reality. How long did it go on? I asked. A year, maybe longer. I didn't realize what I was doing at first, but eventually it became obvious, and by then I was complicit. My signature was on documents, my name was on accounts. If anyone investigated, I'd be the one who took the fall. So you quit? Emma shook her head. I tried to quit. Richard convinced me to stay. He gave me another raise. He promised me a promotion. He told me I was imagining things, that I was stressed, that I needed to trust him. She looked down at her hands, and then one day, the FBI showed up at my apartment. They had a warrant for my arrest, financial fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, a dozen charges, all backed by documents that had my signature, my initials, my handwriting. But you didn't. I did, Emma interrupted. That's the thing. I signed those documents. I filed those reports. I created those paper trails. Yes, I was following orders. Yes, I thought I was doing legitimate work. But legally, I was guilty. What happened? I cooperated, told them everything I knew about Richard's operations. They offered me immunity in exchange for testimony, but before the case went to trial, Richard's lawyers worked their magic. Evidence disappeared. Witnesses recanted. The case fell apart. Emma's voice had gone flat, emotionless. The FBI dropped the charges against Richard, but they didn't drop them against me. Said I'd failed to provide sufficient evidence to corroborate my claims. I ended up pleading guilty to 2 counts of falsifying documents. Got 18 months probation, 5 years of monitoring, and a permanent stain on my record. That's not justice, I said. No, Emma agreed. It's not. But it's what happens when you fight people like Richard Hartwell. They have resources, they have connections, they have the ability to make themselves invisible while making you visible. She finally met my eyes. Catherine told me you're thinking about doing a press conference, about going public with your story. I am. Don't. The word was sharp, urgent. Emma, don't, she repeated. I know what Catherine told you. I know what she promised. That going public will protect you. That it'll make sure the truth comes out. That it'll prevent them from burying this like they've buried everything else. Won't it? It'll make you a target, Emma said. It'll put your face on the news, your name in articles. It'll make you searchable, followable, traceable. And Richard Hartwell will use that. He'll dig into your life, find every mistake you've ever made, every questionable decision, every moment of bad judgment, and he'll use it to discredit you. I don't have anything to hide. Everyone has something to hide, Emma said. Maybe it's not illegal. Maybe it's just embarrassing. But Richard will find it, and he'll weaponize it. That's what he does. She leaned forwards, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. After I testified, after the case fell apart, he destroyed me. Not legally. He couldn't touch me legally because of the immunity agreement. But he didn't need to. He spread rumors, told people I was unstable, unreliable, a liar. He contacted every company I applied to and made sure they knew I'd been investigated by the FBI. He made it impossible for me to get another job in my field. That's illegal, I said. That's defamation, interference. Prove it, Emma said. Prove that he made those calls. Prove that he spread those rumors. He's too smart to leave evidence, Daniel. That's the whole point. He operates in spaces where proof is impossible. She sat back, exhausted. I'm not saying don't fight him. I'm not saying let Jessica get away with what she did to you. I'm just saying be careful. Be strategic. Don't make yourself more visible than you need to be. Then what should I do? Let the lawyers handle it. Let the courts handle it. Stay quiet. Stay safe. Rebuild your life away from all of this. The espresso machine hissed again. Someone laughed at the counter. Normal sounds. Normal life continuing around us while we sat in this bubble of shared trauma. I can't do that, I said. Emma's expression hardened. Why not? Because someone else will be next. Another Michael Brennan. Another me. Another you. And if I stay quiet, if I let this play out behind closed doors, then nothing changes. They get away with it. Again. They'll get away with it anyway, Emma said. That's what people like them do. They always get away with it. Not this time. You don't know that. No, I agreed. I don't. But I know that if I don't try, if I don't stand up and say what happened, then I'm complicit in whatever happens next. I'm part of the silence that protects them. Emma stared at me for a long moment. Then she shook her head slowly. Catherine said you were like her brother, idealistic, trusting, believing that truth and justice mean something. They do mean something. They meant something to Michael, too, Emma said quietly. And look where that got him. The words hung between us like a blade. I'm sorry, I said, for what happened to you, for what Richard Hartwell did. You didn't deserve any of it. Neither did you, Emma said. She stood, gathering her things. But we don't always get what we deserve. Sometimes we just get what we survive. She paused at the edge of the table. If you do this press conference, if you go public, be prepared. They'll come at you with everything. And when it gets hard, and it will get hard, remember that you chose this. You walked into it with open eyes. I will. I hope so, Emma said. I really hope so. She left. I sat alone at the table, my coffee growing cold, watching through the window as she walked away down Mission Street. Another casualty. Another person whose life had been derailed by the Hartwells' greed. Catherine appeared a few minutes later, sliding into the seat Emma had vacated. She tried to talk you out of it, Catherine said. It wasn't a question. Yes. And? I looked at Catherine, at the woman who'd spent 2 years of her life hunting the people who'd destroyed her brother, who'd compiled that impossible folder, who'd orchestrated this entire confrontation. Why did you want me to meet her? I asked. If you knew she'd try to convince me not to do the press conference, why set up this meeting? Catherine was quiet for a moment. Because you needed to hear the risks, she said finally. You needed to understand what you're walking into. Emma's story is real. What happened to her could happen to you. Then why push me to do this at all? Because Emma made a different choice than you're making, Catherine said. She fought from inside the system. She trusted the FBI, cooperated with prosecutors, believed that justice would work the way it's supposed to. And it failed her. She leaned forward. You're not fighting from inside, Daniel. You're fighting from outside. You're making noise. You're creating witnesses. You're doing exactly what Emma didn't do, making yourself too visible to quietly destroy. Or I'm making myself an easier target. Maybe, Catherine admitted. But I believe, and I think you believe too, that the risk is worth it. Because silence is what they count on. Silence is how they've operated for decades. And if we keep giving them silence, they'll keep taking lives. She pulled out her tablet and opened a document. This is the statement I've drafted for the press conference, she said. You don't have to use it. You can write your own. But I wanted you to see what I think needs to be said. I took the tablet and read. The statement was good, clear, factual, emotional, without being melodramatic. It laid out what Jessica had done, what I'd lost, what the investigation had uncovered. It called for accountability. It warned others to be vigilant. It ended with a single line. Silence protects predators. Truth protects victims. I choose truth. Monday morning, Catherine said, 10 a.m., City Hall steps. 20 media outlets confirmed. This is your chance, Daniel. Your chance to make sure everyone knows. Your chance to make sure they can't hide. I handed back the tablet. I need to make a phone call, I said. To David. He'll tell you not to do it. I know. But I need to hear him tell me one more time. I need to make sure I'm doing this for the right reasons, not just because I'm angry or hurt or want revenge. Catherine nodded. Fair enough. But Daniel, there's nothing wrong with wanting revenge, as long as you're honest about it. She stood to leave. Catherine, I said, thank you. For everything. For saving me. For showing me the truth. Thank me when it's over, she said. When they're in prison. When justice is actually done. Thank me then. She walked away, leaving me alone in the coffee shop with a decision that would change everything. I pulled out my phone and called David. He answered immediately. Tell me you're not doing the press conference, he said. I'm doing the press conference, he sighed. Of course you are. When? Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Christ, Daniel. Okay, if you're doing this, we're doing it right. I'm writing your statement. Professional. Legal. Nothing that could be used against you in court. And I'm standing next to you when you deliver it. You don't have to. Yes, I do, David interrupted. You're my client, and apparently you're also my idiot friend who makes terrible decisions that I have to help manage. So I'll be there. 10 a.m., City Hall. Wear a suit. And for God's sake, get some sleep tonight. Thank you, David. Don't thank me yet. This might be the stupidest thing either of us has ever done. Probably, I agreed. But I was doing it anyway. I didn't sleep. How could I? Tomorrow, today, now, since it was already past midnight, I would stand in front of cameras and journalists and curious strangers and tell them everything, every stolen dollar, every forged signature, every lie I'd believed while my life was being dismantled beneath me. The hotel room felt smaller in the darkness, the walls pressing in, the ceiling lowering, my own breathing too loud in the silence. I kept rehearsing the statement David had written, professional, measured. Careful not to say anything that could be construed as defamatory or prejudicial to the criminal case. Just facts, just truth. But facts felt inadequate somehow. How do you reduce 8 years of betrayal to a 3-minute statement? How do you quantify the moment you realize the person you loved never existed? That you'd been married to a performance, a carefully constructed illusion designed to extract maximum value before discarding you like a used bank account. At 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and took a shower. Stood under water that was too hot, letting it scald my skin until I felt something other than numb. When I finally got out, the mirror was fogged completely. I wiped a circle clear and stared at my reflection. I looked tired, older than I had a week ago. There were lines around my eyes I didn't remember being there before. Or maybe they'd always been there, and I just hadn't been paying attention. Hadn't been paying attention to a lot of things. Apparently, the suit David had insisted I wear was hanging on the bathroom door. Navy blue. Conservative. The uniform of respectability. I'd bought it 5 years ago for a job interview that had turned into the position I still held. Jessica had come with me to pick it out. She'd said the color brought out my eyes. Had that been true? Or just another calculated compliment designed to keep me compliant? I put on the suit. It fit perfectly. I looked like someone who had their life together. The irony was almost funny. David picked me up at 8:30 a.m. He looked as tired as I felt, with coffee stains on his shirt cuff and the kind of frazzled energy that came from pulling an all-nighter. He'd rewritten the statement 4 times, he told me, trying to get the balance right between saying enough and saying too much. "You don't have to do this," he said as we drove toward City Hall. "You already said that." "I'm saying it again. Right up until the moment you step up to those microphones, you can change your mind. We can release a written statement instead. We can let the DA's office handle the media. You don't have to make yourself the story." "I'm already the story," I said. The moment that folder was opened in court, the moment Jessica was arrested, I became the story. This is just me controlling the narrative instead of letting someone else do it. David didn't argue, just gripped the steering wheel tighter and navigated through Monday morning traffic toward downtown. City Hall loomed ahead, a beautiful Beaux-Arts building with a gold dome that caught the morning sun. Under normal circumstances, I might have appreciated the architecture. Today, it just looked like a stage, a theater where I'd perform my pain for public consumption. Catherine was already there, standing near the steps with a woman I assumed was her media coordinator. They were setting up a podium, arranging microphones, positioning speakers. Professional, efficient, like they'd done this 100 times before. Maybe they had. "Daniel," Catherine approached as we got out of the car. "You look good. Ready?" "No." She smiled slightly. "Good answer. If you felt ready, I'd be worried you didn't understand what you're about to do." Reassuring. "I'm not here to reassure you," she said. "I'm here to make sure you don't back out." "I'm not backing out." "Then let's go over the logistics." She gestured toward the podium. "You'll stand here. David will be on your right. I'll be on your left. You'll read your statement. Should take about 3 minutes. Then we'll take questions. No more than 5. I'll choose who asks." "You'll choose?" "Yes, because if we open it up to everyone, you'll get ambushed by hostile questions designed to make you look bad. I've vetted the journalists who'll be here. I know who'll be fair and who's on the Hartwell's payroll. On the payroll. Of course, Richard Hartwell would have journalists he could influence, people who owed him favors or feared his retaliation." "How many people will be here?" I asked. Catherine checked her phone. "We've confirmed 23 media outlets, local news, some national, a few independent journalists, probably 100 people total once you factor in cameras, producers, sound techs, and whoever shows up just to watch." 100 people. My stomach twisted. "Hey," David's hand on my shoulder. "You've got this. Just read the statement. Answer the questions. It'll be over in 15 minutes. 15 minutes. I could survive 15 minutes. I'd survived 8 years of systematic theft. I could survive 15 minutes of truth-telling. "It's time," Catherine said. The steps of City Hall were already crowded, cameras everywhere, on tripods, on shoulders, held by people live streaming on their phones, journalists with notepads and recorders, curious onlookers who'd heard something was happening and stopped to watch. Faces I didn't recognize all turned toward me with varying expressions of interest, skepticism, sympathy. I felt naked, exposed. Like every mistake I'd ever made, every weakness I'd ever had was visible on my skin for everyone to see and judge. Catherine stepped up to the podium first. "Good morning," she said, her voice amplified by the microphones. "Thank you all for coming. My name is Catherine Reeves. I'm an independent investigator specializing in financial fraud. For the past 2 years, I've been investigating a pattern of identity theft and financial exploitation perpetrated by members of the Hartwell family." A murmur went through the crowd. The Hartwell name meant something in this city. Money, influence, power. Catherine continued. "Last Friday, in a divorce proceeding between Jessica Hartwell Chen and her husband Daniel Chen, evidence of systematic fraud was presented to the court. This evidence resulted in Mrs. Chen's arrest on charges of identity theft, forgery, and wire fraud. Today, Mr. Chen is here to tell his story, to explain what was done to him, and to encourage others who may have been similarly victimized to come forward." She stepped back, David moved to the podium next. I'm David Park, Mr. Chen's attorney. Before my client makes his statement, I want to be clear. Everything he's about to tell you is supported by documented evidence that has been verified by financial institutions and reviewed by law enforcement. This is not allegation. This is fact. He stepped aside. My turn. I walked to the podium. The microphones formed a forest of metal and foam in front of me. Beyond them, cameras pointed at me like weapons. And beyond the cameras, all those faces, waiting, watching, judging. I pulled out the statement David had written. My hands were shaking. My name is Daniel Chen, I began. My voice sounded strange through the speakers, louder than I expected, echoing off the building behind me. 8 years ago, I married a woman named Jessica Hartwell. I thought I was beginning the best chapter of my life. Instead, I was walking into a carefully planned crime. I looked up from the paper. Some of the faces in the crowd were sympathetic. Others were just curious. A few looked skeptical, like they were waiting for me to prove I wasn't just another bitter ex-husband making accusations. Over the course of our marriage, I continued, Jessica opened 3 credit cards in my name without my knowledge or consent. She accumulated $73,000 in debt using those cards. She forged my signature on mortgage documents, taking out a second mortgage on our home that I never authorized. She systematically transferred money from our joint accounts, money I had earned, into offshore accounts registered in her maiden name. A camera flashed. Someone coughed. I kept reading. In total, she stole $287,000 from me. But more than that, she stole my sense of reality. For years, I believed we were partners, building a life together, struggling with finances like any normal couple. I never knew that the financial stress we were experiencing was manufactured, created deliberately to hide the theft that was happening. My voice cracked slightly on that last part. I paused, took a breath. Last Friday, evidence of this fraud was presented in court during our divorce hearing. Jessica was arrested. But this isn't just about one case. Through the investigation that uncovered what happened to me, we've learned there may be other victims. Other people who trusted Jessica Hartwell and her father, Richard Hartwell, and who were similarly exploited. I look directly at the cameras now. If you've worked with Hartwell Enterprises, if you've been in a relationship with Jessica Hartwell, if you've noticed unexplained financial discrepancies in your life, please come forward. Contact law enforcement. Tell your story. Because silence is how people like this operate. Silence is what protects them. I folded the paper. I'm here today because I refuse to be silent. I refuse to let shame or embarrassment prevent me from telling the truth about what happened. Yes, I was a victim. Yes, I was deceived. But I survived. And I'm going to make sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else. I stepped back from the podium. The crowd erupted, questions shouted from all directions, cameras pushing forward, journalists calling my name. Catherine stepped up, holding her hands out for quiet. We'll take 5 questions, she said. You. She pointed to a woman in the front row with a press badge from a local TV station. Mr. Chen, when did you first suspect something was wrong? I moved back to the microphone. I didn't, I admitted. That's the hardest part to accept. I trusted her completely. I never thought to check our credit report or verify bank statements. I believed we were partners, which meant I believed her. When she said everything was fine, Catherine pointed to another journalist. How did the evidence come to light? Who discovered the fraud? I glanced at Catherine. We'd agreed not to explain her full role. It was too complicated, too likely to raise questions about how she'd obtained some of the information. An investigation was conducted, I said carefully. Evidence was compiled and submitted to my attorney, who verified it with the relevant financial institutions. Once verified, it was presented to the court. Third question, from a man in the back. What do you want to happen to Jessica Hartwell? What did I want? I thought about Emma Torres, about Michael Brennan, about all the other victims who might exist somewhere, unknown and suffering. I want accountability, I said. I want her to face the consequences of what she did. And I want the systems that allowed this to happen. The ease of opening credit in someone else's name, the lack of oversight on power of attorney documents. I want those systems to be examined and fixed so this becomes harder to do in the future. Fourth question. Are you suing for damages? That's still being determined, David interjected, stepping up beside me. Our priority right now is supporting the criminal investigation. Catherine pointed to one last journalist. Mr. Chen, Richard Hartwell's attorney released a statement this morning calling these allegations baseless attacks by a disgruntled ex-husband seeking to extort money from a prominent family. How do you respond? The words hit like a slap. Of course, Richard Hartwell would already be working to discredit me, already planting seeds of doubt. I respond with facts, I said, and I heard my voice getting harder, angrier. I have bank statements. I have credit card records. I have mortgage documents with forged signatures. I have wire transfer confirmations. Everything I've said can be proven. If Mr. Hartwell wants to call that baseless, he's welcome to explain why multiple financial institutions and law enforcement agencies disagree with him. Thank you, Catherine said, cutting off any follow-up. That's all the questions we have time for today. If you need additional information, you can contact my office. She handed out business cards. And just like that, it was over. We retreated into City Hall. Catherine had arranged for us to use a conference room to decompress. The moment the door closed, cutting off the noise from outside, my legs gave out. I sat down hard in one of the chairs. You did good, Catherine said. Really good. You stayed calm, stayed on message, didn't get defensive. I felt defensive. But you didn't look defensive. That's what matters. She was already on her phone, scrolling through something. The live streams are blowing up. Thousands of viewers. Comments coming in fast. Most of them are supportive. Most, I repeated. There are always trolls, David said. People who assume any man claiming abuse is lying. People who think rich families can't possibly be criminals. Ignore them. My phone started buzzing. Text messages flooding in from numbers I didn't recognize. Emails, social media notifications. I hadn't posted anything, but apparently people were tagging me in things. Don't look at those, Catherine advised. Not today. Let the media cycle do its work. Let people process what you said. Tomorrow you can start dealing with responses. What happens now? I asked. Now we wait, she said. The DA's office will be watching. If we're lucky, other victims will come forward. The more people who tell similar stories, the harder it becomes for the Hartwells to claim this is just a personal vendetta. And if we're not lucky, Catherine's expression darkened. Then Richard Hartwell launches a counterattack, uses his resources to discredit you, floods the media with his own narrative, makes this messy enough that people stop paying attention. Sounds fun. It's war, Catherine said simply. You just fired the opening shot. Now we see how they respond. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Mr. Chen? A woman's voice. Professional. Clipped. This is Amanda Winters. I'm a producer at 60 Minutes. We'd like to talk to you about doing a full segment on your story. Are you interested? I looked at Catherine. She was grinning. Yes, I said into the phone. I'm interested. We stayed in the conference room for another hour, fielding calls. 3 more national news programs wanted interviews, 2 podcasts, a documentary filmmaker, several newspapers requesting longer profiles. The story's got legs, Catherine said. She looked energized, almost gleeful. This was what she'd wanted. Maximum exposure, maximum pressure on the Hartwells. By tomorrow morning, this will be national news. By next week, everyone in the country will know the names Jessica Hartwell and Richard Hartwell. Is that good? I asked. It's necessary, she corrected. Public pressure is the only thing that might actually force the justice system to move faster. Normally, cases like this take years to resolve. But when the media is watching, when there's public outcry, things happen. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from my mother. I saw you on the news. You were so brave. I'm proud of you. Something in my chest cracked. I'd been holding it together all morning, during the statement, during the questions, during the media frenzy afterward. But my mother's message broke something loose. Tears burned in my eyes. I need a minute, I said, standing abruptly. I walked out of the conference room, down a hallway, into a bathroom that smelled like industrial cleaner and old pipes. Locked myself in a stall and let myself break down, quietly, privately. Because the public version of Daniel Chen, the brave survivor who stood up to his abusers, couldn't afford to fall apart. That version had to be strong, had to be composed, had to be the face of justice and accountability. But the real Daniel Chen, the one who'd spent 8 years loving someone who'd never loved him back, that version was allowed to cry. When I emerged 10 minutes later, David was waiting in the hallway. "You okay?" he asked. "No." "Fair enough." He handed me a bottle of water. "Drink this. You're probably dehydrated." I drank. "Catherine's setting up the 60 Minutes interview for next week," David said. "She wants to do it at the apartment, your apartment. Show them where you lived, where you thought you had a marriage. Make it personal." "That sounds awful." "It'll be awful," David agreed, "but it'll also be effective. Personal stories resonate more than statistics. If you want people to care, you have to make them see you as human, not just another victim in a news story." "I am just another victim," I said. "No," David said quietly. "You're the victim who fought back. There's a difference." We walked back to the conference room. Catherine was on the phone, pacing, her voice animated. When she saw us, she held up a finger. 1 minute. "Yes," she was saying. "Yes, that would be perfect. I'll have him there. Thank you." She hung up. "Good news," she said. "The DA's office wants to meet tomorrow. They're fast-tracking the investigation. Apparently, after your press conference, they got 6 calls from people claiming to have been victimized by the Hartwells. 6. In 2 hours. 6 people. 6 other victims." I felt sick and vindicated at the same time. "We were right," Catherine said, and there was something fierce in her voice, triumphant. "We were right about the pattern, about this being bigger than just you, and now we have proof." "Those people," I said, "the ones who called in, are they okay?" Catherine's expression softened. "They're survivors. Like you. And now, thanks to you having the courage to go public, they don't have to stay silent anymore." She walked over and put her hand on my shoulder. "You did that, Daniel. You made it safe for them to come forward. That's what truth does. It creates space for more truth." Outside the conference room windows, I could see the city hall steps where I'd stood an hour ago. The crowd had dispersed. The cameras were gone. Life was continuing, normal and indifferent. But nothing felt normal anymore. I'd crossed a threshold this morning, stepped into a role I'd never wanted, public victim, advocate for justice, the face of a fight against powerful predators. And there was no going back. The microphones had amplified my voice. Now I had to live with whatever came next. The backlash started at 3 p.m. I was back at the hotel, trying to eat a sandwich that tasted like cardboard when my phone exploded with notifications. Not messages this time. Articles. Headlines. A coordinated media blitz that appeared all at once, like someone had been holding a finger on a trigger waiting for the right moment to fire. Disgruntled ex-husband makes baseless. Accusations against prominent family. Business Chronicle. Attorney questions validity of evidence in Hartwell case. Financial Times. Sources say Daniel Chen has history of financial instability. City Herald. I clicked on the first article. Richard Hartwell, CEO of Hartwell Enterprises, released a comprehensive statement this afternoon addressing allegations made by his daughter's ex-husband. These accusations are nothing more than a vindictive attempt to extort money from my family, Hartwell stated. Mr. Chen has a documented history of financial struggles and poor decision-making. We believe he's fabricating evidence to justify his own failures. Financial struggles. Poor decision-making. The same narrative they'd tried to sell in the divorce hearing. But this article went further. Much further. According to sources close to the family, Chen left Stanford University without completing his degree, a decision that limited his career prospects. Multiple former employers describe him as adequate but unambitious. Financial records show a pattern of living beyond his means, including purchasing a car and apartment he could barely afford. I read the words again, my vision tunneling. Every fact twisted just enough to become a weapon. Yes, I'd left Stanford to care for my mother. Yes, I'd bought an apartment and car with money I'd saved and earned. But stripped of context, presented through this distorted lens, it sounded like I was irresponsible, unstable, exactly the kind of person who might make false accusations out of spite. My phone rang. David. Don't read the articles, he said immediately. Too late. Daniel. They're calling me a liar. They're saying I'm fabricating evidence. They're making it sound like I'm some kind of deadbeat who married above his station and got bitter when it didn't work out. I know. I'm reading them too. This is Richard Hartwell's playbook. Attack the accuser's credibility before the case can gain momentum. Make people doubt you before they look at the evidence. Is it working? David was quiet for a moment. Some people will believe it, he admitted. People always want to believe powerful families over individuals. It's easier, less disruptive to their worldview. So what do? We stay focused on the facts. We don't engage with the smears. We let the evidence speak for itself. And we trust that the DA's office will do their job, regardless of what the media says. Trust. That word again. I wanted to laugh, wanted to scream, wanted to throw my phone across the room and watch it shatter against the wall. Instead, I just sat there, staring at the screen as more articles appeared, more headlines, more carefully crafted lies dressed up as journalism. There's something else, David said, his voice careful. Jessica posted bail an hour ago. My stomach dropped. She's out? Her father posted $1 million bond. She's on ankle monitor, can't leave the state, but yes, she's out. Jessica was free, walking around, living her life, while I hid in a hotel room, watching my reputation get dismantled in real time. Where is she? I asked. Staying at her father's estate in Hillsborough. Daniel, she can't contact you. The restraining order is still in effect if she tries. I know, I said, but knowing didn't make me feel safer. What about the other victims, the 6 people who called in? The DA's office is interviewing them. But Daniel, you need to prepare yourself. Not all of them will pan out. Some might have weak evidence. Some might get scared and back out. This is going to be a long process. Long. Everything about this was long, endless. A marathon I hadn't trained for and didn't know how to run. Get some rest, David said. Tomorrow we meet with the DA. We need you sharp. He hung up. I sat in the silence of the hotel room, surrounded by the wreckage of my public exposure, and wondered if Catherine had been right, if going public had been the right move, or if I'd just made myself a target for destruction. The comments started appearing around 6 p.m. Not on news articles, I'd learned to avoid those, but on social media, on Reddit threads discussing the case, on Twitter where hashtags were forming, #Hartwell case, #Justice for Daniel, #Team Jessica. Team Jessica. There were people defending her, people saying I was lying, that I was trying to ruin an innocent woman's life, that men like me weaponized abuse allegations to hurt their exes. I knew I shouldn't read them, knew it would only hurt, but I couldn't stop myself. Another man playing victim, Maybe if he'd been a better husband, she wouldn't have left him. Rich people don't need to steal money. This is obviously a shakedown. He looks weak in those photos. No wonder she wanted out. I bet he's making the whole thing up for attention. Each comment was a small cut. Individual, they were meaningless. Together, they bled. My phone rang again. This time, it was Catherine. "I know what you're doing," she said without preamble. "Stop reading the comments. Stop looking at social media. It's poison. People think I'm lying." "Some people think you're lying," she corrected. "Other people believe you. The ratio doesn't matter, Daniel. What matters is the evidence. What matters is the truth." "The truth doesn't seem to be mattering much right now." "It will," Catherine said firmly. "Richard Hartwell is spending money right now, lots of it, to control the narrative. But money can only buy so much time. Eventually, the facts catch up. And when they do, everyone who doubted you will look like fools." "Eventually," I repeated. "How long is eventually?" "As long as it takes," she said. "This is why I warned you it would be hard. This is the part where they hit back, where they make you question whether standing up was worth it." "Is it?" I asked. "Is it worth it?" Catherine was quiet for a long moment. "My brother asked me that once," she said finally. Her voice had gone soft, fragile, in a way I'd never heard before. After the FBI investigation fell apart, after Richard Hartwell's lawyers made the case disappear, Michael asked me if fighting had been worth it, if trying to expose them had been worth the cost. "What did you tell him?" I told him yes. I told him that even if we lost, even if they got away with it, at least we'd tried. At least we hadn't stayed silent. Her voice cracked. 2 weeks later, he killed himself, and I realized I'd given him the wrong answer. I felt my chest tighten. "The right answer," Catherine continued, "the answer I should have given him, is that it's only worth it if you survive it. Fighting is meaningless if it destroys you. Justice is meaningless if you don't live to see it." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I need you to survive this, Daniel. I need you to be smarter than my brother was. If it gets too hard, if the pressure becomes too much, I need you to step back. Protect yourself, because you're no good to anyone, including yourself, if you break." The hotel room felt smaller suddenly, the walls closing in. "I don't know how to survive this," I admitted. "I don't know how to keep going when every headline makes me look like a liar. When half the internet thinks I'm making this up for money, or attention, or revenge." "You survive it by remembering why you started," Catherine said. "You survive it by focusing on the people you're helping, the other victims who came forward because you gave them courage. You survive it by taking it one day at a time. 1 hour if you need to. 1 hour, I could do 1 hour." "There's a meeting tomorrow," Catherine said, her voice shifting back to business mode. "At the DA's office. They want to hear from some of the other victims. I think you should be there." "Why?" "Because they need to see you're not alone. They need to know their stories matter. And frankly, you need to see them too. Need to remember you're not the only person the Hartwells destroyed." "Okay," I said. "What time?" 2 p.m. I'll pick you up at 1:30. She hung up. I sat in the silence, staring at the ceiling, counting the minutes until I could get through another hour. The DA's office was in a gray concrete building that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd confused functional with oppressive. Narrow hallways, fluorescent lights that buzzed like dying insects, the smell of old coffee, and overworked bureaucracy. Catherine and I arrived early. David met us in the lobby. "The other victims are already here," he said quietly. 4 of them agreed to come in person. The other 2 are participating via video call. "What are their stories?" I asked. "Similar to yours," David said. "Identity theft, fraudulent loans, stolen money. But there are variations. One woman had her retirement account emptied. One man had his business sabotaged. It's a pattern, but each case is unique." We were led to a conference room on the 3rd floor. Inside, several people sat around a table, looking as uncomfortable as I felt. A woman in her 50s with gray hair and tired eyes, a man about my age with nervous hands. Another woman, younger, who couldn't stop checking her phone. A man in a wheelchair who looked at me with a mixture of hope and suspicion. These were the other victims, the other people whose lives had intersected with the Hartwells and been destroyed. Daniel Chen, I said, introducing myself. Thank you for being here. Emma Torres, the older woman said. We spoke on the phone, I think, about the press conference. No, that had been a different Emma, but I nodded anyway. Marcus Webb, the nervous man said. I worked for Hartwell Enterprises. Lost everything when they framed me for embezzlement. Sarah Lynn, the younger woman said. I was engaged to Jessica 5 years ago, before you, before Michael Brennan. My heart stopped. Before Michael. I didn't know she... I trailed off. Liked women? Sarah's smile was bitter. She doesn't. She likes targets. Gender doesn't matter. Just net worth and gullibility. The man in the wheelchair spoke next. Robert Chen, no relation, I assume. I was a business partner of Richard Hartwell's. Invested $500,000 in one of his developments. Never saw a penny of return. Before I could process all of this, the door opened. A woman entered, late 40s, authoritative presence, carrying a stack of folders that probably contained our lives reduced to case files. I'm Assistant District Attorney Monica Reeves, she said, then caught herself. No relation to Catherine Reeves, for the record. Different spelling. She sat down at the head of the table. Thank you all for coming. I know this isn't easy. Sharing your stories, reliving your trauma. But your testimony is crucial to building a case against Jessica Hartwell and Richard Hartwell. What kind of case? Marcus asked. Because I already tried prosecuting Richard, the charges disappeared. I'm aware of your previous case, Monica said. I've reviewed the file. The investigation was mishandled. Evidence wasn't properly preserved. Witnesses were intimidated. It was a clusterfuck, frankly. Her bluntness was almost refreshing. But this time is different, she continued. This time we have multiple victims. We have a pattern documented over more than a decade. We have evidence that's already been verified by financial institutions. And we have public attention, which means pressure to actually do our jobs correctly. Public attention that's already turning against us, Sarah said. Have you seen the articles? The social media? Half the city thinks we're lying. Half the city doesn't matter, Monica said. What matters is what we can prove in court. And based on the evidence I've seen so far, we can prove a lot. She opened one of the folders. Let's start with you, Daniel. Your case is the most recent and the most documented. Walk me through what happened. Start from the beginning. So I did. I told her about meeting Jessica, about the whirlwind romance that became a marriage, about the 8 years of what I'd thought was partnership, but had actually been systematic exploitation. The others listened. And I saw my story reflected in their faces, the same disbelief, the same shame, the same anger that I'd been carrying. When I finished, Monica turned to Sarah. You were engaged to Jessica? For 2 years, Sarah said. This was before she started using her father's business connections. She was cruder back then, less sophisticated. She stole from me the old-fashioned way, took my debit card, memorized my PIN, made cash withdrawals while I was at work. How much? $40,000 over 18 months. Plus, she sold some of my mother's jewelry, pieces I'd inherited. Priceless to me, but she pawned them for maybe $5,000. Did you report it? Sarah laughed bitterly. I tried, but we'd been living together. Shared accounts. The police said it was a civil matter, not criminal. They told me to sue her in small claims court. Did you? No. By the time I'd gathered the courage, she'd disappeared. Changed her number. Blocked me on everything. I couldn't even serve her papers. Monica made notes. Marcus, Your case was employment fraud. Richard Hartwell hired me as CFO of one of his subsidiaries, Marcus said. Good salary, benefits, stock options. I thought I'd hit the jackpot. But 6 months in, I noticed irregularities. Money being moved to accounts I didn't recognize. Contracts signed in my name that I'd never seen. What did you do? I confronted him. He said I must have forgotten, that I'd been working too hard, that I should take a vacation, so I did. And while I was gone, he filed police reports claiming I'd embezzled $2 million. But you hadn't. Of course I hadn't, Marcus said, his voice rising. But he'd created a perfect paper trail. Fake invoices, forged authorizations, wire transfers from accounts I supposedly controlled. By the time I got back from vacation, the FBI was waiting at my house. What happened to the charges? Dropped eventually, but the damage was done. My reputation was destroyed. No one in finance will hire me now. I'm blacklisted. Monica's expression was grim. She went through each victim systematically, taking notes, asking questions, building a timeline, and as I listened to their stories, I realized something that made my blood run cold. We weren't random targets. Each of us had something specific the Hartwells wanted. Sarah had inherited money. Marcus had access to corporate accounts. Robert had investment capital. Emma, the one from my earlier meeting, had been positioned to take the fall for tax fraud. And me, I'd had an apartment in an appreciating neighborhood, a car that could be refinanced, savings that could be drained. We were all marks in a long con, a systematic operation. This isn't just fraud, I said, interrupting Monica's questioning. This is organized crime. Monica looked at me. You're not wrong, she said. What the Hartwells have been doing fits the legal definition of racketeering. RICO charges are on the table. RICO? Robert asked. Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, Monica explained. Originally designed to prosecute the mob, but it applies to any criminal enterprise that operates systematically over time. If we can prove the Hartwells were running a coordinated scheme to defraud multiple victims, we can charge them under RICO, which means serious prison time. How much time? Catherine asked. If convicted, 20 years, maybe more. The room went silent. 20 years. Jessica would be in her 50s when she got out. Richard would be in his 80s. But, Monica continued, RICO cases are hard to prove. We need to demonstrate a pattern. We need to show coordination. We need to prove this wasn't just individual instances of fraud, but an ongoing criminal enterprise. How do we prove that? Marcus asked. Monica looked at Catherine. That's where your evidence comes in, she said. The documents you compiled, the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the email chains showing coordination between Jessica and her father. That's what ties everything together. Some of that evidence was obtained through unconventional means, David said carefully. I'm aware, Monica said, and some of it won't be admissible in court. But it gives us a roadmap. It tells us what to subpoena legally, where to look, what questions to ask. She closed her folders. Here's what happens next. We continue investigating. We interview more witnesses. We subpoena financial records from every institution the Hartwells have worked with. We build an airtight case. How long will that take? Sarah asked. Months, maybe a year. These cases are complex. A year, Sarah repeated. A year of them being out on bail. A year of them spending their money on lawyers and PR firms. A year of articles calling us liars. Yes, Monica said simply. That's how the system works. It's slow. It's frustrating. But it's the only way to make charges stick. What if they flee? I asked. What if they take their money and disappear before you can build your case? Jessica is on ankle monitor, Monica said. She can't leave the state without violating bail. Richard could theoretically flee, but we're monitoring his passport. If he tries to leave the country, we'll know. Monitoring, Catherine said. That's not the same as stopping. Monica met her eyes. No, she admitted. It's not, which is why we need to move as quickly as possible without compromising the case, and why we need all of you to stay strong, stay visible, keep telling your stories. The more public pressure there is, the less likely the Hartwells can make this disappear. The meeting continued for another hour. Details, logistics, next steps. But I'd stopped listening because I'd realized something sitting in that room, surrounded by other victims. This wasn't about me anymore. It had never really been about me. I was just one person in a decades-long pattern of exploitation, one data point in a criminal enterprise that had destroyed lives systematically, efficiently, without remorse. And stopping it, truly stopping it, would require more than just my testimony. It would require all of us. After the meeting, the victims lingered in the hallway. We exchanged phone numbers, promised to stay in touch, formed an impromptu support group bonded by shared trauma and the uncertain hope of justice. "Thank you," Sarah said to me before she left, "for going public. I never had the courage." "I didn't either," I admitted. "I was pushed." She smiled slightly. "Sometimes we need pushing." When everyone else had gone, Catherine pulled me aside. "You did good today," she said, "listening to them, being present. It matters." "I feel like I haven't done anything." "You went public. You made it safe for them to come forward. That's everything, Daniel." I looked at her. "Your brother," I said. "Did he have people like this? Other victims who could have testified?" Catherine's expression shuddered. "No," she said quietly. "He was alone. Or he thought he was. If he'd known there were others, if he'd known he wasn't the only one." She trailed off. "Maybe it would have been different." Maybe, the saddest word in the English language. "I'm going to make sure this works," I said. "Whatever it takes, however long it takes. I'm seeing this through." Catherine nodded. "Good," she said, "because we're just getting started." We walked out of the DA's office together. The sun was setting over the city, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. Beautiful. Indifferent. The world kept turning whether justice was done or not. But today, at least, we'd taken another step. Today, we'd built something the Hartwells couldn't buy their way out of. A coalition of survivors who refused to stay silent. 3 weeks after the press conference, Richard Hartwell's empire started to crack. It began quietly. A frozen bank account here. A canceled contract there. Business partners suddenly remembering prior commitments. Investors pulling out of deals that had seemed solid just days before. Elena Martinez called with updates every morning, her voice crackling with barely contained satisfaction. Meridian Holdings, LLC, gone. The Cayman account, frozen. The Singapore Trust, under investigation. She rattled off each victory like battlefield reports. We're tracing $2 million in wire transfers that went through shell companies in Panama. The paper trail leads directly back to Richard. "How long until charges?" I asked. DA says another month. They want it airtight. A month felt like forever. But the cracks kept spreading. The Chronicle ran an expose on Hartwell Enterprises' business practices. 3 former employees came forward with stories of fraud, intimidation, falsified documents. The article used words like systematic and criminal enterprise. Richard's lawyer issued denials, called it a witch hunt, but his voice sounded strained in the televised statement. They were losing control of the narrative. Jessica stayed hidden at her father's estate, her ankle monitor keeping her tethered. But stories leaked anyway, servants talking, security guards sharing observations. She wasn't handling captivity well. Panic attacks, screaming matches with her father. A lawyer quit after she threw a vase at him. The perfect facade was crumbling. "You should see this," Catherine said one morning, showing me her tablet. It was a video, grainy, clearly recorded without permission. Richard Hartwell in his office, shouting at someone off camera. "Fix this, I don't care what it costs. Make it disappear like you did before. Sir, this is different. There are too many witnesses. Then make them unwitnesses. Buy them. Threaten them. I don't care. The video ended. Where did this come from? I asked. Catherine smiled. Let's just say Richard doesn't inspire loyalty in his employees, especially when they realize they might be the next ones thrown under the bus. The video went viral within hours. Richard Hartwell, pillar of the business community, political donor, respectable family man, caught on camera essentially ordering witness tampering. His lawyers couldn't spin that away. The DA's office announced they were accelerating the investigation. RICO charges were imminent. I sat in my hotel room. I still couldn't face the apartment and watched the news coverage with something approaching disbelief. It was actually happening. The system was actually working. Slowly, messily, but working. My phone buzzed. A text from Monica at the DA's office. Grand jury next week. Be ready to testify. I stared at the message. Next week. After everything, the discovery, the divorce hearing, the press conference, the media circus, the coalition of victims, it was finally moving forward. Justice, approaching at the speed of bureaucracy, but approaching nonetheless. I texted back, ready. Outside my window, the city continued its indifferent rhythm. But somewhere in Hillsborough, Jessica Hartwell was watching her world collapse. And somewhere in a glass office tower, Richard Hartwell was realizing that money couldn't buy him out of this one. The folder had been opened. The truth had been told. And now, finally, there would be consequences. The grand jury indicted both of them. Jessica Hartwell Chen, 18 counts including identity theft, wire fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Richard Hartwell, 23 counts including racketeering, money laundering, witness tampering, and operating a criminal enterprise. The trial took 6 months. I testified 3 times. Sat in the witness box and told my story to a room full of strangers. Answered questions from prosecutors and defense attorneys. Watched Jessica sit at the defense table, her face carefully blank, never once meeting my eyes. The other victims testified too. Sarah, Marcus, Robert, Emma Torres, who flew in from Seattle, where she'd rebuilt her life. 2 more people who'd come forward after the press conference. A parade of broken trust. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, forged signatures, email chains showing coordination. The video of Richard ordering witness tampering played on a screen for the jury to see. His lawyers argued entrapment, illegal surveillance, tainted evidence. The jury didn't care. Guilty on all counts. Jessica, 15 years. Richard, 25 years. I was in the courtroom when the verdict was read. Watched Jessica's face crumple. Watched Richard Hartwell, powerful, untouchable Richard Hartwell, age a decade in 30 seconds. Catherine sat beside me, her hand gripping mine so tightly it hurt. "Michael," she whispered. "We did it, Michael." Her brother's ring gleamed at her throat. The money came back slowly, not all of it. Some had been spent. Some was tied up in legal fees and restitution to other victims. But Elena recovered enough that I could start over. I sold the apartment, too many ghosts. Bought a smaller place in a different neighborhood. Furnished it myself, piece by piece, making sure everything was mine. Earned, chosen, real. My mother visited and cried when she saw it. "It looks like you," she said. It did. David and I stayed friends. He represented 2 of the other victims in their civil cases, pro bono. "Someone taught me that justice matters more than money," he said, grinning. Catherine returned to her work, investigating other cases, helping other victims. We texted occasionally. She sent me a photo once, her scattering her brother's ashes at a beach in Hawaii. "He's free now," she wrote. "We both are." The 60-minute segment won awards. Other victims across the country came forward with similar stories. Different predators, same patterns. Laws changed. Background checks strengthened. The systems that had allowed the Hartwells to operate for so long started closing their gaps. One small victory creating space for others. 2 years later, I stood at a coffee shop counter and ordered without thinking about whether I could afford it. The barista smiled, made small talk about the weather. Normal, boring, beautiful. My phone buzzed. A text from a woman I'd met at a support group for financial abuse survivors. She was funny, kind, cautiously optimistic about life. We were taking it slow, very slow. But I was learning to trust again, learning to recognize red flags, learning that not everyone who smiled was performing. Outside, rain fell on the city. I walked to my car, a used Honda I'd paid cash for, no loans, no debt, and drove home through streets I'd learned to navigate alone. The apartment was quiet when I entered, empty, but not lonely. Mine. I made dinner, watched a movie, went to bed early, and for the first time in years, I slept without dreaming of folders, courtrooms, or the woman who'd tried to steal my life. The nightmare was over. The healing had begun. And tomorrow I'd wake up and keep building something real, something no one could take away.